Chapter 181. The winter in the zoo was particularly warm, and there was no need to worry about food or clothing. It was a very good place to spend the winter. With Xiao Qixi and Ao Daisai at the zoo was full of visitors every day, and the income increased by 50% compared to the same period last year. The director was overjoyed and promised to give the staff a bonus this season. He would also give the animals more food to thank them for their hard work. At this time, he did not know that the two peacocks were only here for the winter break and would leave soon. He was immersed in joy and could not extricate himself. After all, the zoo took the initiative to report the peacock situation to the reserve regularly and politely asked if the reserve needed any support for the breeding work. The reserve was actually quite short of money, but they could not accept the zoo's money. If they did, it would be equivalent to selling Xiaowu. Every day, when the director reported the situation to them, everyone was quite depressed. It was as sour as if they had eaten a ton of lemon juice. The breeding season of the first half of the year was coming again. This was the moment that everyone was looking forward to and afraid of. The annihilation of the second half of last year was still vivid in their minds. This year, the professors decided to take out a portion of the eggs to be artificially incubated. Those weak eggs that were destined to be neglected by their mothers might be saved by their careful care. At least they would have a chance to be born. If later on they died because of their own genetic defects, then there was no way around it. Since the failure of the genetic intervention 2 years ago, the laboratory had been researching new ways to overcome it. They had almost achieved results. This was the only good news this year. In the blink of an eye, it was early March, which was just after the new year. This year, Xiao Qixi and Ao Daisai stayed at the zoo to celebrate the new year and had a very sumptuous reunion dinner. During those few days when the zoo was closed, the staff who were usually busy with work came to take pictures with them because it was not allowed during the working day. Xiao Qixi liked this kind of happy atmosphere. Although he was asked to take pictures during the new year, he was still very happy. He was also full of curiosity. No matter what the staff was doing, he would go over and tilt his head to look at the fun. Everyone knew that he and the white peacock were a loving couple, so they often teased him that her boyfriend would be jealous if she clung to the manager so much. Ao Daisai would occasionally hear the humans talking about him, and sometimes he would join in, but most of the time, he preferred to be alone. Of course, Yulashanda wasn't clinging onto the caretaker. It was just that they would be leaving soon, and they might not have the chance to meet again in the future. Hence, he wanted to use his own way to bid farewell to everyone and thank them for their care and love during this period. Indeed, everyone in the zoo liked this cute green peacock with great friendliness. The principal even used him as his WeChat profile picture. This fully demonstrated the principle that the rarer something is, the more valuable it is. Of course, it was also because Yulashanda was indeed good-looking. One night in early March, Yulashanda and Ao Daisai had dinner and flew out of the zoo in the dead of night. They would embark on a journey that would last for half a month. They would fly over numerous mountains and layers of dense forests, riding the spring breeze and braving the spring rain to return to their former home. Xiao Qixi still remembered how excited she was when she left home. Now, she was anxious to return home. She especially missed the cave and the great sparrow at the entrance. With the experience they had when they came, their journey back was very smooth. They only encountered a few spring rains, so they had to stop to rest and wait for the rain to stop. Once, the two of them temporarily hid in a tree to avoid the rain. Then, they saw two owls standing on the tree opposite them. Both of them, foolishly waiting for the rain to stop, fell into the eyes of the owls, and they instantly became vigilant. However, there were only these two trees around. If they flew out, they would be drenched. Forget it. In the beginning, everyone was still quite reserved. They looked at each other, and then they let down their guard and did what they were supposed to do. Some raised their claws to comb their fur, some shrunk their necks and dozed off, and some raised their tails to poop. The one who peed and pooped everywhere was definitely Yulashanda. Through Yulashanda's observation, he realized that the owls could really turn 360 degrees. It was super cool. After the rain stopped, they flew away. Perhaps in the hearts of the owls, They would soon forget that they had met two peacocks. However, Yolashanda would remember this encounter because the owls were very cute. The next morning after they left the zoo that night, the staff found that they were missing. Everyone panicked for a moment, and then guessed that they must have flown away by themselves. The zoo regretfully informed the sanctuary and asked them to keep an eye on the two peacocks' movements. They were puzzled. Why did they fly away again? Was the zoo's food not good enough? Or was the service not good enough? Peacocks should not be migratory birds, but their behavior of running away after winter was right in front of their eyes. How should they explain to the tourists today? And the tickets for tomorrow, the day after, and the day after? The zoo began to have a headache. Compared to their sadness, the people at the sanctuary were very excited. The treasures they had been waiting for a long time were finally coming back. Sure enough, they didn't like the cold winter in the sanctuary, so they went out to spend the winter. Professor Han seemed to be deep in thought. At the same time, he instructed everyone to be careful. It would be best to send more drones out to patrol. Since the day they received the news, they had been waiting patiently. Finally, after half a month, one of the drones captured the figures of the two peacocks. They were still so beautiful and eye-catching. It seemed that the zoo's food was very good. This winter had fattened them up. Without any suspense, the two peacocks returned to their cave. The diligent and gentle white peacock began to clean up, while the spoiled green peacock lay in the nest and slept. Everyone was looking at this scene with smiles on their faces, but suddenly they remembered the close relationship between the peacocks, and their feelings were suddenly very complicated. The green peacock belonged to the white peacock. No matter how good the green peacock's genes were, it could not reproduce for the group. This was the reason why they were disappointed. It was not that Xiao Qixi did not want to work, but he was not the kind of person who could pack a suitcase and rest after a long trip. He was the kind of person who would throw his suitcase aside and sleep for 3 days and 3 nights after returning from a long trip. When he opened his eyes, he found that the cave he lived in had changed. The excess weeds, leaves, and dust were all gone, and Ao Daisai had just fallen asleep beside him. "Thank you for your hard work, Ao Daisai." With the other party doing all the housework, Yolashanda secretly flew out to look for food, hoping that the other party would be able to eat a full meal when he woke up. On the way back, he met the big sparrow who had put on a lot of weight in the winter. The other party recognized him and immediately wanted to chat with him. That would not do. Xiao Qixi quickly gave him some food to shut him up because Ao Daisai was still sleeping at home. Xiao Qixi thought to himself, "Hurry up and eat. We'll talk next time." The peacock's family returned, and the surrounding small animals peeked their heads out to observe them. It turned out that while they were away for the winter, many more animals had come to visit. The most amazing thing was that everyone could live in harmony and did not attack each other. Spring had arrived, and the mountain was full of flowers. The small animals were busy with their own lives. The butterflies and bees were busy collecting honey. The big sparrow was busy looking for a wife, and the fox parents were busy teaching the fox cubs survival skills. After that, Xiao Qixi and Ao Daisai rested at home for 2 days. In fact, Ao Daisai was also very lazy. After tidying up the house, he went to sleep. He was not worried that the little cutie would look for food on its own. When food was delivered to its mouth, Ao Daisai would gladly accept it and then rub against the other party to express his gratitude. After returning home from a zoo, Ao Daisai was very lazy. Sure enough, the days without work were relaxing and boring. Xiao Qixi thought about the peacock eggs and decided to let Ao Daisai take him to the conservation area to take a look. "Why should we go and take a look?" Ao Daisai did not agree with Xiao Qixi's idea and did not understand it. In other words, he was somewhat resistant to stepping into the conservation area again. After all, Yolashanda was stolen from there, and he always had a sense of crisis that Yolashanda would be snatched back by the other party. Because I'm a green peacock, I could have added little peacocks to this endangered group, but now that we are together, I can't give birth to little peacocks. Xiao Qixi thought that the researchers must be very sad. They could have forcibly taken back the green peacock that was exposed outside, but they did not do so. They allowed Ao Daisai to take it as his own. It must be said that it was very friendly. Of course, from Yulashanda's point of view, he originally belonged to Ao Daisai. Think about it. If I am the only green peacock left in the world, how dangerous would my situation become? Chao Chishi leaned into Ao Daisai's arms and said reasonably, "Is it difficult to hatch a little peacock?" It was not difficult, but Ao Daisai did not want to hatch little peacocks other than Yulashanda. If it was not a special situation, why would a male do such a thing? However, he could not resist Yulashanda's coquettish and guilt. So Ao Daisai reluctantly agreed. "Okay, I can steal the eggs back, but I will not be responsible for hatching them." After stealing the peacock eggs, the little bear would have to hatch them himself. Chao Chishi's eyes widened. What? Steal the eggs? What did he say that he wanted to steal the eggs? No, he just wanted to go to the conservation area to see if he could help. Steal the eggs. But thinking about it, this idea was not bad. Raising a nest of little peacocks, they would grow strong and fat, they could fly, catch fish, and even reproduce. Just thinking about it made him feel happy. Ao Daisai's tone, when he said that he wanted to protect and steal the eggs, was as casual as when he said that he wanted to find toys for Yulashanda. Obviously, he did not feel that the survival of the green peacocks had anything to do with him. However, if all the green peacocks were gone, it would indeed affect Yulashanda's situation, so he wanted to steal a few more. What Ao Daisai did not expect was that the group of people in the conservation area could not wait for him to steal the eggs. It would be best if he could bring all the eggs back and hatch them. It was a quiet night. Yulashanda, who had followed him to see the world, was a little nervous when they approached the center of the conservation area. After all, they were here to do something bad. In his previous life, he was a popular and professional civil servant and was respected by the people. In this life, his sneaky behavior was a little shameful. Ao Daisai, won't our conscience hurt if we steal the eggs again and again? Chao Chishi whispered. I won't. Ao Daisai said seriously. He did not know what conscience was at all. Well, if you marry a chicken, follow the chicken. If you marry a dog, follow the dog. Yulashanda was determined to be as wild as Ao Daisai. What was conscience? Beasts had no conscience. In fact, their figures had just crossed the wall in the center of the conservation area when a surveillance camera captured them. The surveillance camera on duty was suddenly awake and quickly sent a message to the higher-ups to report. Professor Han quickly asked, "What's the matter? Was there a problem with the artificial incubation of the peacock eggs?" No. The surveillance camera suppressed the excitement in his heart and calmly relayed the situation. 3 minutes later, Professor Han, who was not very calm, appeared in front of the camera. He happened to see on the screen that 2 peacock dogs were sneakily approaching the peacock garden. They were here to steal the eggs again. However, there were only a few eggs left in the peacock's nest. The rest were in the incubation room. Professor Han hesitated for a second, then turned and rushed to the incubation room. Using a special protective storage bag, he picked out 4 eggs with less optimistic data. They came from 4 different families. At this moment, Professor Han was so nervous that his fingers trembled slightly. He knew that he was making a very bold decision, a decision that did not conform to science. That was, he was going to give these 4 peacock eggs to the white-green peacock husband to raise. Ao Daisai had originally planned to bring the little cutie to the peacock garden to fight with the female peacocks there. Of course, he would be in charge of fighting while the little cutie would be in charge of holding the eggs. For this, they had specially brought the plastic bag that they had stolen from Yulashanda. It had to be said that the quality was good. It was still brand new after 2 years of use. The closer they got to the peacock garden, the less nervous Yulashanda became. He was very much looking forward to meeting the eggs. He wondered what color the eggs would like in the sack. Would the other party like the silver one in his hand? Since he did not dislike it back then, it must be that he liked it. Ao Daisai heard Yulashanda's nagging and felt a little funny. Suddenly, he saw an obstacle in the distance. What was that? The husband and wife walked over quietly and tilted their heads to look at it. Ao Daisai said, "This bag looks better than the one we brought." They immediately decided to take the storage bag for themselves. Ao Daisai opened the bag and was about to pour out the contents when he saw 4 white and chubby eggs. He and Yolashanda were stunned. They had searched for the eggs 1,000 times. When they opened the bag, they saw that the eggs were inside. Xiao Qishi knew that these 4 eggs could not have appeared here out of thin air. It was also impossible that the workers had accidentally left them here. The only answer was that it was the will of the heavens. Quick, 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 close the bag. It will catch a cold. Yolashanda was very nervous about the eggs. He stuffed the empty plastic bag into Ao Daisai's hands and prepared to carry it himself. Let me do it. Ao Daisai stuffed the plastic bag back into his hands because he was still young and inexperienced. Thus, they did not need to go to the peacock garden to fight with the female peacocks. After looking around and seeing that there was no one around, they grabbed the thermal bag that contained the eggs and flew away. Yolashanda hurriedly followed. Bah! Ao Daisai said that he did not want to take care of the eggs. His attitude now did not seem like it. The humans in front of the screen heaved a sigh of relief when they saw that they had taken the eggs away through the surveillance camera. But everything had gone too smoothly, so smoothly that it was a little unbelievable. The white and green peacock husband thought so too. They knew that they had been tricked by the humans. But so what? As long as the eggs were real, it was fine. The author has something to say. Happy May Day. Everyone _W. Chapter 182. Even the most careless males knew that the eggs could not be left out of a warm environment for too long. For these 4 hard-won eggs, Yolashanda and Ao Daisai flew very quickly. A normal peacock could not fly at such a speed. A real bird of prey that came out to hunt at night felt something fly past him. Of course, it was not that exaggerated. With his good eyesight, he could see very clearly that it was a peacock. Fortunately, a proper bird of prey would not curse. Otherwise, he would definitely think in his heart, I've seen a ghost at night. A fancy peacock can actually fly so fast. In the cave, Xiao Qishi returned and laid in the nest. It was called warming the nest first. Actually, he did not know how to incubate eggs at all. However, Ao Daisai had experience, didn't he? Since he could successfully incubate him, he would definitely be able to guide this newbie father. I've warmed up the nest. Ao Daisai quickly put the eggs in. After lying down for less than 2 minutes, Xiao Qishi poked his head out and anxiously instructed Ao Daisai. He was always worried that the eggs would catch a cold. The late spring night was still a little cold. The mountain wind blew in from the cave entrance and ruffled Ao Daisai's feathers. With his back facing the cave entrance, he opened the storage bag and placed the eggs one by one under Yolashanda's stomach. Is this enough? Xiao Qishi's body was much bigger than the female peacock. He easily covered the 4 eggs. Yes, Ao Daisai was not nervous at all. In fact, he was even a little nonchalant, because these eggs were all normal little peacocks, not Yolashanda. Actually, he rather despised these eggs, because if Yolashanda wanted to incubate the eggs, he did not have much space to sleep. There was only a little space. After tossing and turning in the middle of the night, Ao Daisai was also sleepy. He crawled into the nest and squeezed in the little space left. Xiao Qishi looked at his boyfriend in disbelief. He was already like this, and he still wanted to squeeze in. Wasn't he supposed to make a nest by the side? Now was a special moment. Things were different from the past. He was incubating eggs. Ao Daisai, don't you think it's a little crowded? Xiao Qishi saw that she had closed her eyes and had to ask this question. Yes, a little. Ao Daisai opened his eyes. If one listened carefully, there was a hint of dissatisfaction in his tone. Fix the nest tomorrow. The fans thought that he was especially diligent, but that was not the case. The last time he fixed the nest, it was because Yolashanda had grown up and had no choice but to do so. And he was happy to. But this time, it was completely unnecessary. Ao Daisai seemed to be quite lazy about this extra workload. That was not what Xiao Qishi wanted to say. But forget it. The baby should be asleep by now. If there was anything, they could discuss it tomorrow. Also, Ao Daisai's body was very warm. The warmth transmitted to Yolashanda's body made him feel very safe. After all, he was still afraid that his body temperature was not enough to warm the eggs. The husband and wife leaned against each other and slept with their necks intertwined. The 4 white and fat peacock eggs lay under their bellies, absorbing the comfortable warmth of their fathers. Compared to the nest built by the female peacock, the white and green nest built by the husband and wife in the Karst cave was drier and more airy. There was no moisture. The next morning, Yelashanda felt a slight urge to go to the toilet in a daze. Normally, he would turn a blind eye and rush to the toilet to relieve himself. But now, because there were 4 more eggs in the nest before he left, he had to remind Ao Daisai, who was still sleeping, to help him put down the eggs temporarily and not let the children catch a cold. The temperature in the morning was very low. Ao Daisai was in a daze. He listened to the little bear and tucked the eggs under his belly. Then he continued to lean his head against the edge of the nest and slept soundly. Xiao Qishi looked at him tenderly and felt very emotional. This was probably the most carefree life that Ao Daisai had ever lived. He did not have to worry about natural enemies, food, or the bad environment. He was so happy now. He wanted to take a few more glances, but he could not hold it in anymore. Yelashanda hurriedly ran to the toilet with his feet splayed out. When he came back, he lay down next to him sneakily. Incubating eggs was so tiring. He had been lying in the same position for the whole night. Now, he just wanted to find the time to sleep. Suddenly, he thought of an important question. How did Ao Daisai do it? There was no one to help him with the relay, and no one to help him look after the children. How hard must it have been for him? When Ao Daisai woke up, he found that there were eggs under his belly, and Yelashanda was standing by the nest with a fish in his mouth. His cheeks were wet. His paws and long johns were also wet. The most important thing was that the little bear looked at him with a very gentle gaze. He was very happy when he woke up. Ao Daisai, you're awake. Are you hungry? Ao Daisai was suspicious. If Yelashanda was so attentive because of the peacock eggs, he did not seem to be particularly happy. Oh, he was just a little happy. Eat the fish then. Xiao Qishi was not attentive because of the peacock eggs. He was obviously worried about Ao Daisai. He said, I incubated the eggs for the whole night and felt very tired. I suddenly thought of how you were taking care of me alone when I was still in the shell. Wasn't it even harder for you to take care of me alone? Ao Daisai's action of swallowing the fish slowed down slightly. At this moment, Yelashanda leaned over and snuggled up to him. She was full of love. Thank you for what you did for me, Ao Daisai. Wasn't this what he should do? Ao Daisai's first reaction was that little bear was his little bear. Everything he did for her was what he should do. If these little peacocks survived, he should be thanking them. Oh, however, Ao Daisai was also very happy when the little cutie threw herself into his arms. Was this the treatment of helping to incubate the eggs? Although it was very good, he still preferred to do other things. After hugging with his partner for a while, they swapped positions. Yelashanda continued to incubate the eggs while Ao Daisai went out to look for food and collect materials to build the nest. There were some leftovers from last year, but they were a little old. Ao Daisai did not like them anymore. The drone in the park came early in the morning to spy on their lives. When they saw the green peacock incubating the eggs seriously in the nest, and the white peacock going out to look for food and collect materials to expand its nest, the happiness of the people soared. As for the bold decision made by Professor Han, it sounded crazy at first, but the images transmitted by the drone were too convincing. They began to look forward to the day when the little peacock hatched. Ao Daisai, the master of nest repair, pulled out a hole in the original nest and used the new materials this year to widen it by 30%. The new materials looked very good, and it was a sharp contrast to the old materials. Yelashanda, who liked the new and hated the old, whispered, "The new nest is so comfortable. It would be great if the whole thing was new." Ao Daisai pretended not to hear. It would take 2 or 3 days to build a spacious and comfortable new nest. Besides, it was not like they could not live in the old nest. Ao Daisai, do you want to build a new nest? Yelashanda was so thick-skinned that even if the other party did not answer, it did not stop him from speaking boldly. No, Ao Daisai refused. Moreover, His refusal was not without reason. You have to know that when the little peacock hatches, it will make a mess of the nest. That was true. Yolashanda imagined the scene of poop and bird feathers flying everywhere, and no longer clamored for a new nest. After Ao Daisai finished building the nest, it took an afternoon nap in the nest and did not plan to go out for a walk. Yolashanda did not go out either. After having children, their lives could be expected to be turned upside down. In the past, they did not go home if they could, but now they did not go out if they could. To be honest, Ao Daisai did not have any difficulties adapting. No matter what species it became, it always had the flexibility of a bear in its bones. When Yolashanda just grew up, he was full of energy, so he had to go out and walk him. Now, the 4 eggs were playing with Yolashanda. He did not have to go out under the hot sun anymore. This was a good thing. Therefore, they did not go out for a few days. At this time, there were some changes in the things around them. The big tit at the door found a wife. The female bird laid a nest of eggs in his 2 rooms and 1 living room. There were as many as 6 eggs. The female bird was responsible for incubating the eggs, and the male bird took care of the female. Therefore, every day, they woke up early and went to bed late. They were so busy that they did not have time to chat on the tree branches. At first, when they did not hear their friends' voices, Xiao Qishi thought that the big tit was gone. They hurriedly asked their male friends to check on the neighbors. Then Ao Daisai came back and told them that the big tit was like them, breeding chicks. That was great. However, there were also bad things. When the eggs came to their nest, they felt that the condition of the eggs was not very good. There was not much vitality. Yolashanda, who had a rich imagination, even guessed that the eggs were abandoned by the researchers because they were not in good condition. In a way, the truth was more or less the same. Ao Daisai also felt that the condition of the eggs was worse than Yolashanda's condition. However, he did not tell the truth because he did not want Yolashanda to be too worried. What they did not know was that the eggs had been artificially incubated for some time. Therefore, in reality, the situation was much worse than they had imagined. "It's okay, we can do it," Xiao Qishi said. He took care of the eggs more carefully. His eyes were full of tenderness, as if he had laid them himself. Yes, there's nothing wrong with it. Ao Daisai, who did not have any feelings for the eggs, also became competitive because of the bad condition of the eggs. He also felt that they could be saved. Compared to their overflowing confidence, the staff of the park actually felt guilty because the eggs were already eliminated when they were sent out. They did not dare to imagine how sad the 2 peacocks would be if they could not hatch. However, at this moment, the 2 of them, who did not know anything, were carefully taking care of the eggs every day. Yolashanda, who liked to walk around, became calm and gentle overnight. Her whole body exuded a kind temperament. When the white peacock was free, it would also nest by its partner's side and incubate the eggs with them. Even if the eggs in its belly did not react at all, if humans knew about this, they would feel very complicated. These 2 peacocks knew that the eggs were not good, but they did not give up. They still did what they were supposed to do. They went back to their hometown and happily incubated the eggs. However, the zoo was in an uproar. For a few days, the visitors did not see the online peacock husband. Therefore, they complained about the zoo's false publicity. The zoo felt wronged. They had never used the peacocks for publicity. It was all done by fans online. Under the pressure, the zoo called the sanctuary to ask about the peacock's recent situation and whether there was any possibility of cooperation. The sanctuary refused and revealed that the peacocks were currently incubating and did not have time to go out. If the little peacock was born, they could send some photos and videos to them. The zoo thought that they had misheard. Incubating? However, the emperor penguin husband would steal penguin eggs and raise the little penguin. Well, it was not too surprising that the 2 male peacocks would steal eggs to raise them. Half a month later, early in the morning, Ao Daisai flew out to bring food for the little bear. During this time, he heard the little bird's tender voice from the big mountain sparrow's nest. The little mountain sparrow next door had hatched, but their little peacock did not have any fetal movement. Ao Daisai knew very well what this meant. Ao Daisai, who had returned from outside, was hesitating whether to tell Yolashanda the good news. He was afraid that it would hurt her mood. "Ayo Daisai, you're back?" Ah, who knew that Yolashanda would go crazy when she saw him? She was bathed in ecstasy and said to him, "Do you know, I just felt the baby's fetal movement." Ayo Daisai's eyes suddenly lit up. He was a little curious and asked, "Which one is it?" Xiao Qishi proudly replied, "All of them." Ayo Daisai immediately fell silent. He thought that Yolashanda had gone crazy. Finally, it was impossible for all of them to have fetal movement. Among these few eggs, one or two had to have necrosis, or even more. Really? However, Ayo Daisai did not have the heart to burst his partner's fantasy. He also looked very happy and listened to the eggs one by one. They were all quiet and weak at the same time. "Not bad. They're much better," Ayo Daisai said very naturally and then rubbed his partner's cheeks. Alisanda had put in a lot of effort and thought for these eggs. After Otis finished feeding Alisanda, he squeezed himself next to Alisanda and secretly planned. If these 4 eggs were gone, he would steal the healthier eggs. It did not have to be a peacock. It could be a sparrow too. No matter what, he had to let Yolashanda fulfill his wish of raising a bird. Xiao Qishi, who had not gone out for a long time, quickly found out that his friend's children had hatched. This was because they came to his nest and chattered, jumping up and down and making a lot of gestures. Only Alisanda could understand what the other party was trying to express from her cheerful and lively appearance. He was so jealous, but he still congratulated the great big peacock brothers for raising 6 rice buckets. After the rice buckets woke up every day and opened their mouths to ask for food, the female bird did not have to stay in the nest all the time. She could take turns to go out with the male bird to look for food. However, this did not mean that the workload would be reduced. After a few days of raising the chicks, the great big peacock was not round anymore. Time passed day by day. Under the careful care of the white and green peacock husband, the eggs only really recovered after about 20 days. There was not much time left before the eggs hatched. They who had been developing slowly in the beginning finally raised the eggs. Then, as if they knew that they did not have much time left, they began to develop crazily. They could not fall behind. Otherwise, when they were not fully developed on the day of hatching, they were destined to die. Yolashanda did not know that the babies were struggling hard. He talked to them in his heart every day, cheering for them and cheering for them. In order to make sure that each egg was evenly heated, he woke up in the middle of the night to flip the eggs. Ayo Daisai was also shining brightly at the side and was very willing to help him. The 2 male peacocks were like 2 small furnaces, giving the eggs double the warmth. The author has something to say. Explosive words. If every expectant father was like Ayo Daisai, there would be no need to worry about the fertility rate not increasing. Chapter 183. In the blink of an eye, another week had passed. The eggs in the garden that were in good condition started to hatch. This was the advantage of spring. The workers were very happy, but they were still worried about the 4 eggs in the mountains. They did not know how they were doing. The babies that were chasing after them had not hatched, but Little Bear's father was taking care of them. There was still hope. They heard that in the later stages of hatching, the eggs could not be kept warm. They needed to be dried occasionally. Xiao Qishi was always worried. Every time he dried the eggs, he could not wait. Ayo Daisai could only stop him, lest he lay on the eggs again. Didn't he say that he needed to listen to the experienced guidance? Why was he not listening now? Xiao Qishi, boo-hoo. It was probably because he was worried. Indeed, he was not as calm and steady as Ayo Daisai in this aspect. Although the development of these eggs was relatively slow, there was still some movement on the 31st day. Xiao Qishi and Ayo Daisai stayed by the nest, staring at the eggs that were moving. They were ready to help the child. Previously, Ayo Daisai did not help much because he could communicate with Yolashanda. He could know about Yolashanda's situation at any time. But it was different now. It was possible that every second they hesitated, the little peacock was going through a life and death situation. So they did not hesitate anymore. Once the little peacock showed signs of hatching, They helped to peck open the eggshell. This way, the little peacock only needed to peck open the membrane of the air chamber to be able to take in the first breath of air. After successfully avoiding the risk of suffocation, the rest could be done slowly. Yulashanda stared at it the whole time. So this was how he was born. Thinking about it, Ao Daisai must have been very nervous. Because he was very nervous now, his palms were sweating. The weak little peacock only stretched its head out. It closed its eyes and leaned its head against the gap of the eggshell. It did not move anymore. It was resting. To be honest, it was quite ugly. But the two fathers looked at it with great interest. They did not think that their child was ugly at all. They were so busy that they forgot to eat and sleep. They didn't know how many meals they hadn't eaten, but they didn't feel hungry. While the second peacock was absorbing the egg, the second egg also started to move. This time, Yulashanda helped the little fella to peck open the eggshell, just like how Ao Daisai did. He pecked very neatly and beautifully. When he saw the other party's meaty little head poking out, his heart melted. It was indeed a weak and pitiful thing. It was bald and only had a little hair on its head. Even its small mouth looked soft. How could this thing peck through the eggshell? Seeing that the second peacock was successfully born, Ao Daisai finally remembered that they had not eaten yet. So, he ordered the little bear to guard the place while he went out to bring back some food. They've just been born. Do they need to eat? Xiao Qishi was not thinking about himself. He could only think about whether the babies would be hungry. No, Ao Daisai said, maybe they will eat tomorrow. At night, Ao Daisai came back and the third peacock was born. The other two had already climbed out of the eggshell and huddled together for warmth. The temperature of the night dropped rapidly. Yulashanda was very anxious. He thought about it and squeezed into the nest to warm the nest with his own body temperature. It was an animal's instinct to move closer to warmth. The two meaty little things climbed under Yulashanda's abdomen in no time. Soft feathers covered them, and even their heads could not be seen. One look, and one could tell that they were frozen. At this moment, Yulashanda was very proud. But lying in the nest and being fed by Ao Daisai, it felt like a pregnant woman going through confinement. Forget it, forget it. Why think so much? There was only the weakest egg left in the nest. The husband and wife stared at it and felt that it was a pity. They felt that the egg was most likely dead, but neither of them said it out loud. They avoided talking about it. When sleeping at night, Ao Daisai hugged the egg and pretended that it could still survive. That night, Xiao Qishi and Ao Daisai did not sleep well. It was a strange feeling to have 3 more living creatures in the nest. Early the next morning, after a night of rest, the little peacocks opened their mouths and asked for food. The experienced Ao Daisai pushed the egg to the little bear and said, I will go out to find food. You look after it. Okay. Xiao Qishi used his wings to take the egg into his arms. He stared at it for a moment and lowered his head to rub it. At this moment, the little peacocks under his stomach started to protest. They opened their mouths and called out loudly. God, they were just born. Why were they calling out so loudly? Xiao Qishi facepalmed, but he was very happy that the babies were so energetic. After shouting for a while, the little peacocks seemed to be tired and returned to their soft state. Only their small mouths were still slightly open, as if they could accept food at any time. Poor babies. Xiao Qishi coaxed them in his heart. Sleep, sleep. You won't be hungry when you sleep. Oh no, it should be sleep, sleep. Daddy Ao Daisai will bring food back for you in a while. Ao Daisai came back very quickly. In his claws was a beehive with a bee pupa inside. Xiao Qishi was stunned. You came back so quickly. Of course, before the babies were born, Ao Daisai had already scouted the area. He knew exactly where the beehive was. Xiao Qishi was stunned. This was indeed Ao Daisai's style. He was too cool. Without further ado, he quickly took out the bee pupa and fed it to the babies. The white and plumpy pupa was tender and easy to eat. It was the best nutrition for babies when they were just born. When Yulashanda was young, she also ate bee pupa when she grew up. Ao Daisai stood at the side of the beehive, facing the 3 little mouths waiting to be fed. He took turns to feed them. These little fellows were very active in eating. They swallowed the bee pupa as soon as it reached their mouths. There was no need to watch or urge them. Ao Daisai was too busy. Oh, 3 rice buckets. Yulashanda watched the babies eat and sighed. Ao Daisai felt that it was easier to serve the 3 of them than to serve Yulashanda. The little peacocks were hungry and full quickly. They were full after stuffing a few bee pupa into their mouths. However, their desire to live was very strong. Even if they were full, they would still swallow another one. Ao Daisai was very satisfied. There were still a few bee pupa left in the beehive. Ao Daisai took them out and fed them to Yulashanda. She turned her head away in disdain and refused to eat it. Ao Daisai had no choice but to eat it himself. Do you dislike it because it can move? But fish can move too. Yulashanda liked to eat fish. He really did not understand. How could this be compared? Fish was a common food. After Ao Daisai's father finished feeding the little peacocks, he also ate some snacks. After that, he went to find food to feed Yulashanda and himself. He was very busy and would continue to be busy. As a beast with laziness engraved in his genes, Ao Daisai always felt that he was carelessly pulled onto a path of no return by Yulashanda. The drone captured their interaction at the entrance of the cave. From this, they knew that the peacock eggs they were taking care of had hatched. There were a total of 3 eggs, and they all looked quite healthy. The video was sent back to the center of the sanctuary. Everyone was happy about this. To be precise, it was a miracle. They did not have much hope at first. The more they thought about it, the guiltier they felt. Professor Han, who decided to send the eggs out, prayed day and night that at least one of the 4 eggs must survive and not let the 2 peacocks be sad. He did not expect that 3 would survive. He could not believe it. As for the one that was lost, he only felt a little regret. He was not too sad. To them, this was already something they were used to. There were a few eggs that were left in good condition in the park that did not survive, not to mention those that were sent out. Therefore, everyone easily gave up on the 4th egg. They did not care about it anymore. They did not know that the egg was still lying in Yulashanda and Ao Daisai's nest. They treated it equally and did not give up on it. During the day, when Ao Daisai went out to look for food, the egg was placed in Yulashanda's arms. At night, when they slept, the egg was taken care of by Ao Daisai. They worked together to raise the little peacocks that were just born 2 days ago from a wrinkled ball to their current chubby appearance. Although they were still ugly, Yulashanda doted on them no matter how she looked at them. She did not mind them crawling around under her belly at all. Raising babies meant that they had to accept this. Moreover, they would poop in the nest. Fortunately, the bird's poop had a layer of membrane, so it would not be everywhere. They just had to be diligent in changing the soft thatch in the nest, just like changing diapers. This job was, of course, given to Ao Daisai. Therefore, Ao Daisai was sleeping soundly in the afternoon, only to be woken up by Yulashanda's paws. Usually, without any communication, Ao Daisai knew what he had to do. He would wake up in a daze to change the thatch, then go back to sleep. Not long after, he would wake up to look for food to feed the little peacocks. This was the daily life of a stay-at-home dad. After a busy day, Ao Daisai stared at the egg in his arms. He felt that it was better not to hatch this egg. To be honest, taking care of 3 little peacocks was already a little tiring for him. The main thing was that the time he had to sleep in was greatly reduced, and his partner's attention was always on the little peacocks. He would be jealous. Ao Daisai directly told Yulashanda this idea in a sour tone. However, not only did the other party not support his idea, she even scratched him with her paws. How can you say that? Pay. A bear's words carry no harm. Don't you think it's tiring to take care of so many children? Otis was not tired at all. However, he purposely said that to make Little Bear reflect on itself. It wondered if it had neglected something recently. It's okay. Let Yulashanda do the math. Compared to the life without children, she was more diligent in changing the thatch. This was considered a small effort, and she would bring back more food. Ao Daisai had always just moved the bees home back. Was this a lot of work? Taking a step back, he said, "When they're a little older, I can take turns with you to go out and look for food. Then you can sleep in more." Yes, the workload was indeed not a lot. Moreover, Little Bear was responsible for taking care of the children all day long. The one who should be working hard was the silly Yolashanda. Whether these little lives lived or died, it had nothing to do with him. However, it was as if there was a sense of duty that affected Yolashanda, and it always made him lend a helping hand. What Ao Daisai did not know was that this sense of duty originated from himself. Initially, he took in a poor little bear in the ice and snow at the North Pole. After the little bear grew up, he was never stingy in doing good deeds. After pondering over Ao Daisai's sour tone, Yolashanda seemed to understand the crux of the problem. Ao Daisai was not tired at all. He just felt that the little peacocks were distracting his partner's attention, and he was jealous. Thinking of this, Yolashanda did not try to reason with the other party. Why should he reason with a problem that could be solved with a kiss? That was the behavior of a fool. Ao Daisai was indeed very easy to coax. Yolashanda gave him a kiss and a few sweet words, and in the blink of an eye, he was appeased. Not to mention raising 3 little peacocks. Even if it was 10, he could afford it. Thinking back to the harsh environment in the grassland, Yolashanda was able to raise the 5 of them alone. Not to mention that the environment now was so relaxed. Raising children was as easy as turning one's hand. The husband and wife, who had always been in a sweet relationship, looked lovingly at fourth Dan, who was not in good condition, and hoped that he would get better soon. It was only because of these unprofessional parents that they were filled with hope. If it was a human who paid attention to science, they would have thrown the egg away long ago. But strangely, fourth Dan, who could have been sentenced to death, kept hanging on to the last thread of life and did not give up on himself. He was fine. He was just growing too slowly. Fortunately, his parents did not give up on him, and there were always 2 gentle heartbeats to accompany him. For days after the siblings were born, on a starry night, fourth Dan finally used his tender beak to knock on the eggshell. This was the knock on his door to the human world. After that, he did not need to do anything. His loving parents would help him complete the remaining 99 steps. Even if it was late at night, Yolashanda and Ao Daisai still woke up immediately when they heard the child knocking on the door. Then they excitedly helped to peck open the eggshell. This movement woke the 3 little meatballs up, and they kept opening their mouths to ask for food. But this time, they did not get any response from their parents, because their attention was focused on their little brother. This was a very weak little peacock, and with the help of Ao Daisai, it poked its head out. For the next half an hour, it did not move at all, and its breathing was very weak. Compared to the other little peacocks with big bellies, this one looked very thin and small, and even when it breathed, its belly could not be seen rising and falling. The husband and wife thought that the little baby had died. Because of this, they were sad for half the night and planned to find a good place to bury him tomorrow. It was hard to say whether their desire to bury the little baby was too strong, but when the sun rose, the little baby moved stubbornly. Yolashanda thought that her eyes were playing tricks on her, and hurriedly asked Ao Daisai, "Ao Daisai, did you see him move just now?" Ao Daisai nodded. "Yes, I saw him." The husband and wife were surrounded by a happy atmosphere. The invisible big stone that was pressing on them disappeared, and they finally had the time to care about the 3 children who were screaming until their throats were broken. Ao Daisai said to them, "Be good and wait for a while. I'll be right back." Xiao Qishi wanted to laugh at him for wasting his energy. These little things would not understand. They only knew how to eat and poop. However, it was very amazing that they actually listened to Ao Daisai and really stopped screaming. Xiao Qishi was envious and jealous. Maybe it was a coincidence, or maybe it was a tacit understanding between father and son. Wait, did Ao Daisai treat these 4 little guys as his own children? If he did, then it was Ao Daisai's first time being a father. Little peacock, it doesn't matter if you think you are fathers or not. We have already acknowledged you as our fathers. Chapter 184. Wasn't this nonsense? If Ao Daisai didn't treat these little cubs as his own children, he wouldn't have worked so hard to fulfill his responsibility as a father. It wasn't like he had nothing better to do. Although A.O. Daisai admitted that he didn't have any feelings for these eggs at first, and even somewhat disliked them. As the cubs came out of their shells one by one, he developed some feelings for them. Reluctantly, he was willing to be the father of these little peacocks. In that case, Yulashanda was the mother. As A.O. Daisai thought this, he happily flapped his wings in the air. He and Yulashanda had children. The surrounding little animals all heard the peacocks cry at the same time. Of course, they didn't judge whether it was nice or not like humans. They only knew that this peacock was very happy, as if it was reporting good news. Once, Xiaoqishi asked A.O. Daisai if he regretted not being able to reproduce. A.O. Daisai firmly said that he wouldn't. Those were his true words. As an intelligent person, he didn't care about instinctive reproduction. Little Bear also said the experience of being a father might be worth trying, although we won't have the chance. The little lion that he adopted was almost a year old. Xiaoqishi never treated them as his own children, and the little lion also didn't treat him as its father. Their relationship was more like that of a big brother. So to be honest, Xiaoqishi still didn't know what it was like to be a parent. A.O. Daisai, who was flying in the air, thought of Little Bear's words against the wind. He thought that maybe he understood. Yulashanda, who was sometimes serious and deep, was more like a fool most of the time. For example, right now, his little brain couldn't hold anything, and he only stared at the weak little Dan Dan. Right? Although they were out of their shells, the simple-minded parents didn't want to change their babies' names. It didn't seem wrong to directly use the egg's name. With the joint efforts of Yulashanda and A.O. Daisai, they reluctantly fed Dan Dan some food. How pitiful! They didn't even know if they swallowed it. The three healthy babies snuggled together to sleep after eating. In fact, when Xiaoqishi warmed them up, they weren't so harmonious. Although their fur wasn't fully grown, they had already started fighting openly and secretly. This was the nature of animals. From birth, they tried their best to fight for a chance of survival. When there were more cubs in the nest, the stronger cubs would push the weaker ones out of the nest. They weren't born bad. This was just a way to survive. In the face of such a struggle, most parents would just stand by and watch. Then, they would focus on raising strong children. So, Estes parents teat to teach, so every time he saw them, he would teach them a lesson and use a stern voice and stop them from hurting each other's teeth. Est, est, teat, to teat, tst. So, it was easy to take care of. The workers at the reserve were waiting for them to take out the dead egg, but they only saw the white peacock cleaning the eggshell. What was going on? The actual situation in the peacock's nest required the right time, place, and people to take pictures. So, they didn't know that there were actually 4 little peacocks. But looking at the eggshell cleaned by the white peacock, people couldn't help but think positively. But how was that possible? That egg was more than 35 days old. A few people studied the eggshell over and over again. Their minds were in a mess. They wanted to know what had happened. Could the 4th little peacock have survived? The professors were tormented by this thought. If it was true, what did it mean? Think about it. Those were the worst eggs. Professor Han recalled this fact over and over again. Those were the worst eggs. He had personally picked them out and sent them out. His conscience was tormented. At this time, good news came from the front line. It confirmed that there was indeed a 4th little peacock in the white and green peacock's nest, and it was still alive. This didn't make Professor Han feel relieved. Instead, it made him feel even more sorry for the white and green peacock. They were the worst eggs, but all of them were alive. They were amazing. Some of the workers in the reserve cried. This was the most surprising news they had heard since they started working in the breeding industry. Thank you, white and green peacocks. They were amazing. Professor Han, please don't blame yourself. Your decision was very brave. If it weren't for you, we wouldn't have seen this result. Someone comforted Professor Han. With everyone's words of comfort, Professor Han's burden was gradually lifted. He also enjoyed the joy of the good news with everyone. It was indeed great. They would soon see the white and green peacock with 4 little ones behind it. Just thinking about it made their hearts melt. But the humans also guessed that the fourth little one would be very weak. They hoped it would survive. The white peacock had experience in taking care of the little ones. Everyone was confident in him. The green peacock was also very gentle. From the beginning, he took the initiative to bear most of the responsibility of raising the children. After 2 days of forced feeding, Dan, who was in the ICU, used all his strength. Under the nervous gaze of the two fathers, he pooped for the first time in his bird life. He could eat and pooped. This meant that his physical condition had improved. After clearing the burden on his body, Yolashanda and Aodisai could clearly see Dan's body moving up and down as he panted. It seemed that he had a strong vitality. When they fed him again, he had a positive feeling of swallowing on his own. However, his limbs were still weak. He could only lie on his stomach and move his little head occasionally. He was a smart little guy. He knew how to use his beak to push against the nest and change his vision. Sometimes, he changed his vision too frequently. The fathers were afraid that he would twist his neck. At this point, Dan was out of danger and could be transferred to a normal ward for observation. In late April, the weather was getting warmer day by day. At noon, when the sun was at its brightest, the temperature had reached 28 degrees Celsius. It was a sunny day. The wind blew in from the entrance of the cave, brushing the hair on the heads of the lively babies and their beady eyes. On the 10th day of their birth, a layer of fine hair grew around the babies' bodies. They were no longer bald. Now, the two fathers, who were busy taking care of the babies every day, found the time to take a nap together. Xiao Qishi was still worried. Do you think the babies will be cold? Ao Dai Sai. No, they have hair. Moreover, the temperature is high now. After receiving Xiao Qishi's assurance, he finally dared to sleep with peace of mind. It was too tiring to take care of the children. Despicable humans. Why did they stuff 4 eggs in one go? Humans were really sinister. If Xiao Qishi was given a chance to start over, he would also bring all the eggs back and not leave a single one behind. So he asked for it. Dan, who had not been discharged from the hospital, was lying between the two fathers obediently. After eating, he would sleep. After sleeping, he would poop. What was worth being happy about was that Dan was no longer skinny. Instead, Dan had gained weight. Given a little more time, he would grow to be the same as his siblings. A gentle breeze brushed past Yolashanda's sweet dreams. When he woke up, the sun had already set. He instantly felt flustered because he had only planned to sleep for 2 hours. What about the children? He turned his head in a daze and realized that the furry babies were all nestled next to Ao Dai Sai. They were all fine. Yolashanda heaved a sigh of relief. He leaned his head on the edge of the bed and planned to sleep for a while more. Hurry up and get up to look for food. Ao Dai Sai urged him. Xiao Qishi opened one eye and scratched his chest with his claws. What? He was on the look for food today? Yes. Ao Dai Sai glanced at the 3 sleeping bags beside him. He could not leave. If he moved, these little guys would wake up. When they woke up, they would be so noisy that it would give him a headache. All right, Xiao Qishi knew the consequences of that. If Ao Dai Sai flew away, he would be the one with a headache. So, he shook off his sleepiness and prepared to leave. First, he carefully handed Dan over to his father. As he was moving Dan, he realized that Dan had become heavier. This was the first time Xiao Qishi was responsible for going out to look for food since he hatched the eggs. The consequence of not flying for a long time was that his flying posture was strange. Oh God, it felt so good to not have a baby. He could fly freely. He decided to walk around outside as much as he could. But the free air outside was very good. It was indeed very happy. However, after flying for a while, Xiao Qishi could not help but think, what should the babies eat? What should Ao Dai Sai eat? Forget it. He was not destined to be a playboy. He was a good partner and a good father. Although Ao Dai Sai took care of the little guys very carefully, they were hungry when it was time. When they were hungry, they would wake up. When they woke up, they would chatter nonstop. They craved food, but there was no food to satisfy them at the moment. Even Ao Dai Sai, who was usually calm and steady, could not help but feel a little frustrated. Of course, he did not blame these little babies, nor did he blame Yolashanda, who had not returned yet. All right. A.O. Daisai tried his best to coax them gently. Your mother will be back soon. Can you be quiet? While he spoke in his heart, he would also use his actions to comfort the children. These seemed to have an effect. The little babies quieted down a little. However, they began to crawl around in the nest as if they were looking for their mother. A.O. Daisai, you want to look for food? Don't waste your energy. I'm the only one in the nest with you. Worried that these little guys would hurt the fourth Dan, A.O. Daisai picked them up one by one and drew a line with his beak. Stay here. I'll spank you when you come out. After saying that, he paused. He remembered that he had used this trick on Yolashanda before, but it did not seem to have any effect. Sure enough, the little fur ball did not listen to him at all. After a while, it was crawling all over the nest again. A.O. Daisai leaned there gloomily. He glanced sideways at the fourth Dan's safety. Once the brothers and sisters crossed the line, he would take action. Fortunately, these little brats had been nurtured by Yolashanda and would no longer bully their weak siblings. This was related to their ability to eat their fill. The parents were impartial and took good care of each child. Naturally, there would not be any internal conflicts. Yolashanda landed at the entrance of the cave with a jar of food. She tilted her head and saw A.O. Daisai taking care of the children with a bitter expression. She could not help but want to laugh. How was it? It was not easy to take care of children, right? This time, A.O. Daisai should know how hard it was for him every day. Once their mother's breath approached, the little brats immediately gathered around the nest. They raised their heads and opened their little mouths as if to say, I want to eat, I want to eat. The green peacock, who was feeding the children for the first time, methodically took out food to feed them until they were full. A.O. Daisai watched from the side. Suddenly, a small fish was placed by his mouth. He looked up and met Yolashanda's sly gaze. His heart was filled with sweetness. Chirp, chirp. A childish cry interrupted their affectionate gaze. The two fathers' hearts skipped a beat. Then, they turned to look at the source of the sound. It was Dan, who was lying in the nest. He opened his little mouth and wanted to eat. His siblings were full. Only he, this little pitiful child, had not tasted the taste of food. Yolashanda hurriedly threw the thought of his partner to the back of his mind. He no longer felt that to be pupa was scary. He tore the food into smaller pieces and fed it to the pitiful child. Dan ate the most food in history. Looking closely, his little beady eyes were half open. He seemed to be looking at his parents shyly. Chishi and A.O. Daisai were overjoyed. They leaned their heads together and admired the shy child. He's so cute. Chishi said this loudly. Then she whispered to A.O. Daisai softly. Although there was no need for them to do so, only the two of them could hear their words. However, he insisted on it. A.O. Daisai, we have to praise the child often. This way, he will have confidence when he grows up. What kind of twisted logic was this? However, Yolashanda's twisted logic was too much. A.O. Daisai did not argue with him. He also did not correct Yolashanda. We're different from him. Don't waste your energy. Yes, he's so cute. A.O. Daisai said to the ugly child. Fortunately, after a month, Dan looked no different from the other siblings under their careful care. Now all the little peacocks were round and smooth. They were very healthy and lively. The small world in the nest could no longer satisfy their desire to run around. Their father had a headache. Before letting them out of the nest, he had to block all the holes in the cave. Otherwise, they would not know if one of the children went missing. I'll leave this important task to you, A.O. Daisai. Chishi made the first move. Oh no, he made the first move to control the sparrow. Then, with nothing to do, he lay in the nest leisurely and watched A.O. Daisai block the holes. A.O. Daisai went back and forth to pick up small stones and block those damn holes. These were all things that Yolashanda loved to play with when he was young. The difference was that Yolashanda could distinguish the danger, but the unintelligent little peacocks could not. In fact, they were stupid. A.O. Daisai simply did not want to admit that these brainless little things were his children. After a day of hard work by A.O. Daisai, the dangerous places in the cave were cleared. The little peacocks were allowed to come out of the nest. They immediately used their little claws to run around on the ground. They were chattering nonstop. It had to be said that they looked like a group of little chicks. Not long after, there were a few piles of fresh dung on the clean ground. Ao Daisai, who was in charge of the housework, started to look askance again. He speechlessly discussed with Yolashanda. See, you have to teach them how to use the toilet. Of course, this was necessary. Otherwise, there would be no place to walk in the house. Yolashanda greeted the children a few times and led them to the toilet. He raised his tail and demonstrated to them that this was the correct place to poop. Babies, remember, you can't poop on the floor at home. Otherwise, Ao Daisai Daddy will throw you down a mountain one by one. Demonstration and verbal threat were two things at the same time. Ao Daisai almost laughed. Was he so violent? No, he was painstakingly cleaning up the mess left by the little ones. Yolashanda had wronged him. Fortunately, the four little ones were smart. They quickly learned that they could not poop on the floor at home. They could only poop in a specific place. This was not surprising. The cubs would learn the behavior of their parents. Usually, like parents like children. Therefore, at Yolashanda and Ao Daisai's house, it was common to see the little fur ball playing happily, but suddenly running to the toilet. After solving the problem, they would run back to play with their brothers and sisters. Sometimes it was just one little fur ball, sometimes it was two together. Of course, it was not uncommon to see a swarm of bees rushing to go. This phenomenon was called joining in the fun. The author has something to say. The daily life of a husband raising chickens, W. Chapter 185. Ever since these little things were born, the husband and wife's cave was lively enough. Xiao Qishi suspected that he was living in a chicken coop every day. It was only quiet when everyone was sleeping. At this time, the children of the same age at the door were of different species. Although they were smaller than the little peacocks, they had reached the age where they were eager to fly. Sure enough, life was a cycle. More than a year ago, Big Peacock, who was still single, stood at the door of his house every day and watched Ao Daisai teach Yolashanda how to fly. More than a year later, Yolashanda led the four little fur balls and stood at the entrance of the cave every day to watch the neighbor's children learn how to fly. The little peacocks all tilted their little heads and opened their beady eyes. They were so focused that they forgot to eat and sleep. This fully showed that whether it was the happiness of humans or animals, it was built on the pain of others. Xiao Qishi looked at these little things lovingly and thought to herself, "You'll have a day like this too, my darlings." But when the time comes, he would try to be gentle. Human drones could always capture images of them standing at the entrance of the cave. One big peacock leading the four little ones. They were idle all day, pecking here and there with their beaks. Xiao Qishi. Understand, this is the life of taking care of children. Kak the white peacock took care of the rest of the things. This seemed to be a negotiated division of labor. Just like the married men and women in society, the wife was responsible for taking care of the babies, and the husband was responsible for ensuring food and shelter. It was not hard to see that the green peacock was playing the role of a wife here, and a wife who was doted on. The unmarried girls in the unit even felt that their boyfriends were not as good as this white peacock. If he was so good, they would have married him. In order to avoid any future troubles, such as premature death, the park usually only announced the existence of the little peacocks when they were about 3 months old. However, there were exceptions, such as this group of stubborn children who grew up in the wild. They were only 2 months old, but they were healthy and lively. No one thought that they would die halfway through their lives. The peacock husband and wife who loved them would never let this happen. Finally, after a meeting, the officials decided to announce the 4 little peacocks in advance. The image of 4 cute little fur balls and 2 beautiful fathers standing together was undoubtedly a critical hit to the hearts of the people who were paying attention. They were incoherent, and all the comments were exclamation marks, such as happiness came too suddenly, and so on. Such a miraculous scene ruthlessly plucked at the string of people's emotional control. It was very shocking. White Peacock first raised an unrelated green peacock and became partners, unbelievable, and then hatched 4 eggs with his partner. Even the work units that specialized in breeding were ashamed of their inferiority. Employer, I know. Treat it as normal and don't compare yourself to others. Now that all the children in the neighborhood had left their nest, the little fur balls no longer had their daily pastime. Xiao Qixi could no longer keep them in check. Often, he would catch one and the other would disappear. How can he be so calm when his son is missing? Yulashanda was not in a hurry, and Ao Daisai was not in a hurry either. He replied that he got it, and then returned after finding enough food. It was not that Xiao Xiao was not in a hurry, but that this kind of thing happened 3 times a day. After so many times, he became numb. Otis did not dare to go out alone to look for them. If he were to return alone with the 4 of them, Otis would definitely tear him apart if he did not know how to behave himself. When Ao Daisai came back, he put down the food and asked where they went missing. Can't you hear the sound? Yes, it's in our area. They could not hear the sound, and they could not smell the smell of blood. The unlucky child was probably asleep somewhere. Xiao Xiao wanted a facepalm. He remembered how anxious he was the first time they went missing. Now, he felt that he had become desensitized to losing children. Okay, Ao Daisai nodded. He did not blame Xiao Qixi, because he knew how difficult it was to look after 4 children. Don't worry. He rubbed against the little cutie, then spread his wings and flew away. The furry ball's legs were short and tired easily, so it was impossible for him to walk too far. The little bear could not feel his presence, which meant that the distance was not too close. Ao Daisai quickly analyzed the general area based on the information he had obtained so far. He then focused on looking in these places. When he found the child, he was nestled in a hidden, cool corner. His head was stuffed into his wings, and his tail was facing outwards. He was sleeping soundly. In the afternoon, it was cool and shady here. It was indeed a good place to sleep. As for the surrounding natural enemies, snakes, eagles, and so on, they had almost disappeared in the 2 years that Ao Daisai and Yulashanda had occupied this place. The child's father walked to the furry little butt and looked down. He really could not bear to wake the sleeping child. In the blue sky and white clouds, a light breeze blew. A leaf fell, making a rustling sound. The little peacock was awakened by the leaf. He lifted his little head from his wings and opened his sleepy eyes. At first, he seemed to be a little flustered by the unfamiliar surroundings, but soon saw a familiar figure. He immediately squeaked and threw himself into his father's arms like a little missile. Ao Daisai used his wings to pull him to his side. Although he knew that he could not understand the language between him and Yulashanda, he still communicated naturally. Mommy is worried sick. Hurry up and go home. Then the little peacock walked in front with his butt swaying. A beautiful and gorgeous white peacock walked slowly behind him. Although the white peacock could pick up the baby and go back quickly, he was very patient to walk with the little guy. Xiao Qixi, who was anxiously waiting at the entrance of the cave, finally saw the lost child being chased back by his father. Good boy. He was still shaking his head. He did not feel that he had done anything wrong at all. Xiao Qixi used his beak to peck the little guy's head, reminding him not to sneak out next time. Otherwise, he would have a taste of mixed doubles. The little peacock chirped a few times. He did not know if he had been taught. Then, as if he had smelled the smell of food, he quickly blended in with his siblings and ate the fish that his parents had divided into sections. Looking down on his parents' authority, he was too disobedient. Xiao Qixi decided to leave the little guy alone and not interact with him anymore. 10 minutes later, the little babies finished their meal with the help of Ao Daisai. They rushed to Xiao Qixi's side and took an afternoon nap with him. Like parents, like children, this group of little furry balls did not always sleep on their stomach. They also liked to lie on their backs, especially when they had just eaten. Their stomachs were round, and lying on their stomach was not comfortable. After eating, they would lie down next to their mother. Their feet were up and their heads were tilted to one side. There was nothing more comfortable than this. The 4 little peacocks soon began to snore. Xiao Qixi was determined to ignore the little ones just now. Now that the other party's warm little bodies were squeezed into a pile next to him, he did not have the slightest bit of temper. In the quiet afternoon, Ao Daisai cleaned up the house without any complaints. Xiao Qishi was checking the condition of the children's bodies to see if they were dirty or injured. He said, "The weather is hot now, and the feathers are dirty. Do you want to bring them to the water to wash?" If their little fur was dirty, there was no way they could clean it with their help. Ao Daisai did not have any objections. How should he put it? If Yulashanda stayed in the cave with the children, the little rascals would always want to run out. It was better to bring them down and let them play to their heart's content. The next day, the sun was bright, and it was a good day for bathing. Ao Daisai and Xiao Qishi both agreed to wash the little chicks at home. Go out to play, come in quickly. As for how to bring them down, Yulashanda did this. He took out the storage bag that he used to steal eggs and opened the door for them to line up to come in. Small animals had a special fondness for this kind of narrow space, just like how cats liked boxes. When they saw an entrance, they would enter. The little peacocks walked into the storage bag curiously, feeling that they had found a new place to play. Ao Daisai hung the storage bag around his neck and flew down with them. The children stayed in the dark storage bag and didn't know what was going on. Ao Daisai landed on the green lawn and opened the storage bag to let the children out, only to see 4 little heads curiously looking outside a few times before carefully walking out. This was a new environment. With their parents next to them, they quickly let go of their reservations and began to look for insects to eat on the grass without anyone teaching them. The furry balls used their claws to scratch on the grass. From time to time, they tilted their heads and chirped twice at their parents, as if to see if they were still there. Ao Daisai and Yulashanda watched from the side. Although they did not say anything, there was a feeling of happiness in their hearts. Even if they had been busy and worried for more than 2 months, at this moment, they felt that everything was worth it. Xiao Qishi and Ao Daisai could not help but turn to look at each other. Although they did not communicate, they could feel each other's inner thoughts. After letting the furry balls play on the grass for a while, the 2 fathers brought them to a relatively calm water surface. Perhaps it was because of the unfamiliar environment. The 4 little peacocks followed their parents closely. They were not as daring as they were when they were near home. This was the first time they came into contact with a small stream. There was a strange feeling when their claws stepped on the water. It was cool and comfortable. They could not help but lower their heads and shake their heads a little. Then, they raised their claws to wash their faces. Yes, that's it, Xiao Qishi thought to himself. However, they only knew how to wash their faces. They did not realize how dirty their abdomens and buttocks were. Xiao Qishi still had to help them. He and Ao Daisai agreed that they would each take care of 2. Ao Daisai. As a pure beast, his concept of parenting was destined to clash with Yulashanda's. However, since this was not the first time he had been led astray by her, he did not intend to resist this time. The children and grandchildren would have their own blessings. Maybe the little peacocks raised this way would be very strong too, Ao Daisai thought to himself. Thus, the group of little fellas, who were still a little shaky in the water, were pressed into the water by their parents for a thorough bath. After the bath, they felt like they had shed a layer of fur. Through the drone, the staff saw the whole process of the little peacocks being forced to take a bath. It could be said that it was extremely tragic and cruel. Although the weather was warm, the water in the mountains was very cold. They would fall sick if they took a bath like this. How could they treat the precious and fragile little green peacocks like this? What? It was their parents who did this. Then it was fine. Their breeding skills were not as good as the white and green peacocks. They did not have the right to point fingers. The staff, who were having a hard time enduring, then saw the white and green peacocks drive the wet little peacocks out into the sun. They dared to bet that the little peacocks would fall sick when they returned home at night. However, they did not, for little peacocks with wet feathers ran around the grass. They were still full of energy after playing for a day. Their feathers were quickly dried by the summer wind and sun. The sun also removed the bacteria in their feathers. Therefore, Chao Chi-shi and Ao Daisai got 4 fluffy and fragrant little peacocks, not 4 sick little peacocks. The little peacocks in the park did not have good immune systems. Whenever the weather was slightly humid, they would show symptoms of discomfort. It was impossible for them to take a bath in this kind of weather and be exposed to the sun. The couple, who had brought the children out in the morning, did not plan to bring them home before sunset. Therefore, they had a picnic outside at noon. According to Chao Chi-shi, they could just get something to eat for lunch. It did not matter if they were full or not. Ao Daisai felt that it made sense, so they got some fruits and grass seeds. The family of 6 ate casually, together with the shells and stone conches that Chao Chi-shi dug out from the sand. They barely made it. The little peacocks in the park had no way to refer to their willful diet. Even if they killed the staff, they could not feed the little peacocks with this diet combination. When the sun set, the little fur balls ran into the storage bag one by one. This time, their mother brought them home because their father was going out to look for food. They had a simple lunch and a big meal at night. These were Chao Chi-shi's words to the children. Even though the children couldn't hear or understand, she treated them like intelligent beings. How many days could Mau Mau's brand new chicks last? After a few days, it was too hot outside. With such strong ultraviolet rays, even animals could not stand it. Yulashanda decided to stay at home with the children. He felt that the temperature this summer was not right. It was only June, and it was already so hot. Wouldn't it be even hotter in July and August? Ao Daisai was more sensitive to changes in the weather. He also felt that the situation was very serious. Even the cool stream could not solve the problem. The first thing he thought of was to migrate to avoid the heat. He did not know which place was cooler nearby. Because of the hot weather, the children's appetite had decreased a lot recently. They were listless at noon. Even the strict father, Ao Daisai, felt sorry for them. Yulashanda also felt sorry for them. Okay? However, the cooler cities were far away. They were at least 100 kilometers away, and at most a few hundred kilometers away. It was not convenient for them to travel long distances with the children. When the two fathers could not sleep because of the problem of avoiding the heat, Yulashanda suddenly thought of a wonderful idea. They could go to the reserve's air conditioner. Ao Daisai heard and immediately remembered the coolness of the air conditioner. That was indeed a good idea. Okay, it's decided. Tomorrow, they would carry the children to the reserve's air conditioner in a gunny sack. Maybe they could even have lunch. At night, they would pack up and go home to sleep. Perfect. The author has something to say. He's coming. He's coming. He's bringing the little fur balls to the air conditioner in a gunny sack. Chapter 186. Humans had also predicted that the weather would be particularly hot this year, and all industries had taken measures to cool down. Units with dense populations and animals in society had already used air conditioning and other cooling equipment. Animals in the wild were more distressing, and it was difficult for humans to help them. They could only concentrate on providing some ice and food. For example, the wild pandas in the Central Plains had recently been frequently breaking into human villages to look for water and food. After eating and drinking, they took a fancy to the villagers' air conditioners and lay down on their backs, refusing to leave. Although the villagers were flattered, pandas were national treasures. They ate dozens of kilograms a day. What kind of family could afford to raise them? They could only call the relevant units and ask them to take them away. It was said that the pandas in the wild enjoyed the ice provided by humans. When they woke up and found that the ice was gone, they would get angry and fight with their own kind. Therefore, humans no longer provided them with ice. Hot spots were fine. It was better than fighting. The animals in the reserve had better conditions. There was a combination of open air and semi-open air areas. They could freely choose to stay indoors or outdoors. At noon, the hottest day, the animals chose to stay indoors with air conditioning, lying lazily and motionlessly. In the evening, when the temperature dropped, they would come out to exercise. The weak little peacocks grew up indoors. People did not want this, but there was no way to change their physique in a short period of time. There were many big trees planted in the peacock garden. It was lush in summer. Male and female peacocks strolled leisurely under the trees or rested. Sometimes, other units would organize tours of the green peacocks. Of course, in addition to tours, they would also provide some resources to the reserve. Otherwise, the reserve would not be open for tours. For example, there would be a rich unit coming tomorrow. If they treated them well, they would receive a new batch of equipment. The professors in the Peacock Garden had already arranged their work and were only waiting for tomorrow. The next morning, the gates and halls of the various parks in the reserve were opened, ready to welcome guests. In the mountains, Yelishanda and Ao Daisai woke up early in the morning. They finished their breakfast and were going to the reserve before the sun rose. Then there was a problem. It was still unknown whether the reserve would provide food or not. Just in case, they still brought some food. Ao Daisai, quickly bring the children. Xiao Chishi was ready. He grabbed a food storage bag. Yes, it was the one that Ao Daisai picked up from the trash can. Yes, while their parents were busy, the little fur balls were watching attentively from the side. They seemed to know that they were about to go out and play, so they were a little excited. From time to time, they would spread their little wings and jump twice. Go in. Ao Daisai opened the bag and grabbed it with one leg. Although it was a very human action, it didn't feel out of place when he did it. The little fur balls did not find their parents strange. After all, they had never come into contact with other peacocks. In all fairness, Xiao Chishi felt that his children were definitely smarter than other children. He was a little smug and a little ashamed. No, he cannot compare. The human children were already rolling enough. Why would the little peacock care about these things? There was no need for that. It was time to set off. Yelishanda was concerned about whether the children were ready. Do you want some water? They drank before. Ao Daisai noticed just now. Oh, Xiao Chishi nodded and looked at him. Do you want some? Ao Daisai. Ao Daisai had been busy all morning, and the journey would be exhausting. He should drink more water in the summer. Okay. When Ao Daisai passed by the little bear, he rubbed against him and then lowered his head to drink water in front of the lunchbox that stored water at home. Xiao Chishi waited beside him. At this moment, he felt warm and peaceful. I'll drink some too. The dazzling green peacock squeezed to the side and squeezed the white peacock to the side. The two of them drank water together in the lunchbox. Ao Daisai chuckled in his heart. No matter how many years had passed, Yelishanda was still a child in his heart. After drinking water, they faced the morning sun and happily set off. In order to avoid the sun, they deliberately flew lower and used the canopy to block the ultraviolet rays for them. The reserve had just opened. The guests they were prepared to welcome hadn't arrived yet, but two special guests arrived first. This time, they still didn't use the main entrance. The difference was that they had come in the middle of the night last time, but this time, they came in the middle of the day. The surveillance cameras in Peacock Garden saw them and couldn't believe it. Everyone's first reaction was, "There are no more eggs in our garden." Everyone also noticed the plastic bag around the white peacock's neck. It looked quite heavy. The other party seemed to be very careful when he landed. The green peacock next to him also had a plastic bag around its neck, but the other party landed more violently. Obviously, there was nothing important in that bag. Professor Han was directing the inspection work. Compared to the elderly Professor He was now the main force in Peacock Garden. When he heard that the white and green peacock had come, he was stunned for a second, then went back to his computer to connect to the surveillance cameras. He happened to see the white peacock open the plastic bag and a string of small furry balls walk out. 1, 2, 3, 4. There were 4 in total. They were furry and round. When they came out, they shook their heads and flapped their wings like humans who had been sitting in a car for a long time and stomped their feet after getting out. It wasn't hard to see that they had just been on a journey. This Professor Han was completely stunned because he never would have dreamed that the white and green peacock would bring the little peacocks over as guests. This was completely unexpected. The other workers were also stunned and were melted by the cuteness. They had been waiting for the guest to arrive and unintentionally waited for an even more adorable guest to arrive, a gorgeous family of 6 wild peacocks. Seeing the little fur balls walk out one after another and stand on the flagstone road of their park like tourists looking around, their hearts trembled slightly, and even their breathing subconsciously became lighter. Little peacocks, a huge sense of happiness and surprise spread out in his heart. It was like a stone being thrown into a lake in his heart, causing ripples to spread out in circles. Professor Han snapped back to reality because someone patted him on the shoulder. The person was also rambling. Peacocks, there's so many of them. How do we settle them? I mean, the guests are coming soon. Wouldn't the noisy humans startle the peacocks? Professor Han also frowned. This was the first time they didn't look forward to the arrival of guests who came to deliver supplies. Just as they were at their wits' end, the family of 6 on the stone road made a new move. Everyone's eyes were focused on them, and there was no time to think about anything else. It was as if their brains had crashed. This scene was too shocking for the breeders to see. 6 wild peacocks, and 5 of them were green peacocks. There were only about 30 of them in the garden. Xiao Qi and Ao Daisai led the way on the stone road, and a string of little furry balls followed behind them. Even though they were very curious about their surroundings, they didn't dare to fall behind. That lively appearance was something that humans had never seen on the little peacocks in their own garden. So cute, oh my God, they're so cute. Where are they going? The 2 fathers are so good-looking. People thought that the 2 peacocks with 2 long tails were even more beautiful than in the photos and videos. It's just a normal stone road, but I have to say, the way they walked the red carpet, they could see this scene from morning to night. Speaking of which, they were still discussing whether to roll out the red carpet today. If they had known that this family of 6 would come, they would have rolled it out. Now everyone was wondering what this family of 6 wanted to visit the garden again. He thought that they would try their best to satisfy them. Soon, Xiao Qi and Ao Daisai led the children to a fork in the stone road. One road led to another garden, while the other led to the main hall of their own garden. Of course, they didn't hesitate to choose the road leading to the main hall because the air conditioning was close at hand and was waving at them. Seeing that they had set foot on the road to the main hall, the staff in the office above the main hall were secretly excited. They're here. They're actually going into the house. However, the little peacocks soon encountered the first obstacle to entering the main hall. They were too short, and it was a little difficult for them to climb the stairs. The 2 big peacocks leisurely went up, leaving the 4 little peacocks there clumsily climbing. Because they weren't very familiar with it at first, the first little peacock that tried to climb fell down. The humans who were observing the case were heartbroken. They couldn't wait to rush downstairs and use their own hands as a stepping board to carefully send the peacock up the stairs. They also condemned the big peacock. Hey, you can't just walk on your own. Turn around and look, okay? Your children haven't come up yet. Sometimes, this same-sex couple was really lovable and hateful. Finally, the 2 peacocks seemed to have realized that the children weren't following, so they went back. However, they didn't offer any help. They just watched the children work hard. Even Yelishanda, who always doted on children, knew that they couldn't help in this situation. Otherwise, they would raise a group of stupid children who couldn't be independent. The 4 little peacocks climbed slowly. After mastering the technique, they could climb up, but it took a lot of effort. When they all climbed up, the 2 beautiful fathers rubbed against the children one by one, as if they were praising them. Looking at the way the peacocks were educated, and then looking at the way the garden was educated, the humans felt bored and touched their noses. Many people couldn't help but look at Professor Han, and Professor Han looked back indifferently. Why were they looking at him? If possible, who wouldn't want to have such healthy and lively little peacocks? Did they think that he didn't want to? He wanted to. In the blink of an eye, the group of peacocks swaggered into the bright door that had just been cleaned to welcome the guests. As soon as Xiao Qi and Ao Daisai stepped into the bright room, the comfortable air entered their thick feathers, giving them a refreshing and pleasant experience. It was too comfortable. This was the beauty of the air conditioner. They hadn't enjoyed it in a long time. The little chicks behind them, oh no, the little peacocks felt a little surprised when they felt the air conditioner for the first time. They didn't even dare to move forward until they got used to it. Xiao Qixi looked at them in amusement. A bunch of country bumpkins who haven't seen the world. At this moment, the other father, Ao Daisai, was observing the surrounding environment. It was very spacious. The bright lights above them were turned on, and the floor was so clean that it could reflect their shadows. Overall, it was a good place to escape the summer heat. They picked an inconspicuous corner and put down their storage bags. Yulashanda, we have to find a toilet for them. Although Ao Daisai was a beast, he knew that he couldn't urinate or defecate in human territory. This was a habit that he had developed in his previous life. Yes, let's see where it is. Xiao Qixi raised both of his paws in agreement. He was most worried about this, although he was a specially protected animal, and so was a string of peacocks he brought. It was not good to cause trouble for others. Soon, Ao Daisai, with his head raised, found the sign that led to the toilet. He walked there. People heard him make a little noise. At first, they didn't know what it meant. Later, when they saw the little peacocks jumping and following him, they knew that he was calling for the children. Ao Daisai took the children to the toilet. Xiao Qixi, who felt very tired after flying all the way, took the opportunity to rest. He lay down on the ground, his head resting on the storage bag, his two paws facing the sky, and he was so comfortable that he snored. The air conditioner is so cool, he officially announced. This summer, their family of 6 had contracted this haul. As for whether the humans agreed or not, it did not seem to be within their scope of consideration. The humans looked at the 2.5-year-old Xiaowu with nostalgia. They were touched. Xiaowu's sleeping habits were the same as when he was young. Every time he slept, it was as if he was dead. As for the group of 1 adult and 4 children who entered the toilet, no one knew what they were doing inside because there were no surveillance cameras in the toilet. On such a hot day, everyone naturally thought that they were going to drink water. However, the water in the toilet was not that easy to get. They had to turn on the tap. This was something that the peacocks could not do. The little peacocks wanted to drink water, so someone had to be sent to turn on the tap for them. This person had to be Professor Han. No one was more suitable than him. The others wanted to go, but they were afraid that they were not professional enough and would disturb the peacocks. Professor Han was a little nervous. He came to the door of the toilet on the first floor. Before he entered, he heard the sound of water splashing. He was very confused. Was there someone inside? After he entered, he saw a very magical scene. The white peacocks were standing on the sink. The tap was open, and the spacious basin was half filled with water. The 4 little peacocks were playing in it. Professor Han, even though he had many questions about why the white peacocks would turn on the tap, this scene was really cute. As a mature adult with a more reserved personality, he could not express his feelings like a little girl. He could only stare blankly. After a few seconds, he remembered that this was a scene that deserved to be frozen. Ao Daisai had already judged that the person was a familiar face from the sound of the footsteps. He turned to look at Professor Han without any guilt. Later, the other party took a picture of them seriously. It was unknown what he was going to do with it. Ao Daisai was not afraid. The toilet was a public facility. Everyone could use it, even animals. Yulashanda had said so. However, Yulashanda had also said that one should use public facilities in a civilized manner. When others also needed it, one should not hog it for too long. Ao Daisai thought that this human wanted to use the toilet. He quickly ended the peacock's fun. He picked them up one by one and put them on the ground. The cute little peacocks were having fun. Suddenly, they had no more fun. They shook their bodies a little unhappily. For a moment, there were small splashes of water everywhere, and the little peacocks chirping sounds. Just from their lively body language, one could feel that they were unhappy with their father for picking them up. They wanted to continue playing in the basin. Professor Han, who was very indulgent of the little peacocks, could not wait to send them all back to play. It was fine even if they played until the sky turned dark. The toilet would immediately be sealed off for them to play. The cool white peacock did not care about the little peacock's protests. He took the lead and walked out. His cold appearance made Professor Han sweat again. The little peacocks were also very obedient. Although they were chirping, they obediently followed their father. Moreover, Professor Han was not afraid of the existence of humans. He even felt a small peacock stepping on his feet, leaving a maple leaf-shaped watermark on his leather shoes. He did not dare to move at all. When a group of peacocks walked out of the toilet, their figures continued to appear in people's sight. Even the little peacocks looked wet. It could only be said that the two peacock fathers were too rough. First, they exposed their children to the sun with wet hair. Today, they had to play the scene of the air conditioner after taking a shower. Little peacocks, it's okay, we are durable. Chapter 187. Of course, Ao Daisai would not let the little fur balls sleep next to Lashanda with their wet fur. The little peacocks were all full of energy after coming to a new environment. How could it be possible for them to sleep peacefully? It had been too hot for the past 2 days. Little Bear did not sleep well at home. Ao Daisai did not allow the little peacocks to wake up their partner. He led the lively and cute bunch to the platform at the door. Professor Han tidied up the washroom and calmed himself down. When he came out of the washroom, he saw a bunch of cute footprints on the ground. These footprints would disappear soon. He followed them out quietly and saw 5 father and sons on the platform at the door. The fairy-like white peacock was drying the feathers of the 4 babies. He was a qualified father. The green peacock was sleeping in the corner of the room. He did not have to worry about his children at all. He was so happy. Even intelligent humans could not help but be envious of the white peacock's unconditional kindness to his partner. Although the group of beautiful peacocks at the door was very pleasing to the eye, the guests were coming soon. The staff contacted Professor Han. The guards have informed us that the guests have arrived at the door. Professor Han knew what he should do. He should use a cage to keep the little peacocks because there would not be 1 or 2 people coming to visit later. There would be a group of people. There might be as many as 10 or 20 people. It would be troublesome if they were disturbed. Professor Han first found a small cage. When he held the cage in his hands, he realized that the white peacock was staring at him intently. Don't worry, there will be a lot of guests coming later. I will move your children to another place temporarily and do a physical examination for them. I will not hurt them. Professor Han could not help but express his intentions to the white peacock. Then, he slowly walked over and opened the cage to the ground. If there would be a lot of people here later, then it was indeed necessary to move. Ao Daisai could of course choose to wake Lashanda up now, but he agreed with the human's idea of a physical examination. As he was more confident in his judgment, Ao Daisai thought about it and very cooperatively lured the little peacocks into the cage. Seeing that he was willing to cooperate, Professor Han breathed a sigh of relief and had a deeper understanding of this peacock. He was too smart and too cute. Do you want to wake up your partner and let him follow? Ao Daisai glanced at Professor Han. So these people knew that Lashanda was his partner. Of course, he had to wake Lashanda up. However, Lashanda was sleeping too soundly. He used his claws to push him twice, and he used his head, but he still did not wake up. As a partner, Ao Daisai did not feel that there was anything wrong with it. Instead, Professor Han, who was standing to the side. Since little 5 could not wake him up, and the white peacock did not seem to have the intention of forcing him to wake up, Professor Han braced himself and said, "Then I'll bring the little peacocks for a physical examination. It's in the house behind. It's very easy to find. You can come over any time." Professor Han felt that with the intelligence of the 2 peacocks, the possibility of them getting lost in the park was almost zero. With Ao Daisai's acquiescence, Professor Han took the cage and left without any resistance. After he left, he looked at the little peacocks with pity. "Your father is true love. You're just an accident." The half-dried peacocks did not show any signs of fear. They opened their round black eyes and were full of curiosity about everything outside. They even used their beaks to peck at the cage to see if it was delicious. "Are you hungry?" Professor Han's heart melted. He quickened his pace and came to a semi-open courtyard at the back. The little peacocks and the female peacocks were raised here. Of course, Professor Han did not directly bring the 4 wild peacocks in. They did a physical examination in the front yard. The staff in sterile clothes took over the cage. Professor Han stood outside the glass window and waited for the results. Although he wanted to go to the front hall to see the two peacocks, the other party had left the children in his care. He could not be negligent. He could only tell his colleagues to try not to disturb the two peacocks resting in the hall. The guests who came to visit the reserve first looked at the adult green peacocks from afar. They had already seen this in videos. There was nothing special about it. Furthermore, their target this time was this year's newborn peacocks. They heard that this batch was very healthy and lively. There were also a lot of them. To go to the depths of the park to see the peacocks, they had to pass through the front hall. The staff who led the guests greeted them in advance. "Everyone, we will pass through a hall later. There are two peacocks resting inside. They are peacocks from the wild. Haha, maybe the weather is too hot, so they are here to take advantage of the air conditioning." The guests were very curious. Wild peacocks taking advantage of the air conditioning, that was too cute. Those should be blue peacocks. There were many of them in the wild. It was not rare. Everyone nodded in a friendly manner. They laughed and chatted with each other. They expressed that it was good to take advantage of the air conditioning. Humans and animals lived in harmony. They were guests. They were guests of the park. The two wild peacocks were also guests of the park. It was natural for them to take care of a meal. The staff hurriedly nodded and took care of the food. The guests walked into the hall quietly and persuaded the staff softly. They asked the park staff not to be stingy. How much could two peacocks eat? The staff thought to himself. It was not just two. They had families to feed. Not long after, all the chatter stopped. Everyone in the hall quieted down. The guests from the wild resting indoors were unexpected. It was not a blue peacock that was commonly seen in the wild. It was a beautiful white peacock. It was as white as the snow on the branches of the first lunar month. It was very beautiful. At this time, the peacock screen was open. It made people unable to take their eyes off it. They also lost the mood to chat. A few seconds later, everyone began to take pictures and whisper, "Look, there's another one behind him. It's a green peacock." Just by looking at the tail, people could guess that the green peacock behind the white peacock should be very beautiful. People wanted to see how the green peacock looked like when it opened its tail. However, it seemed to be sleeping. Its sleeping posture was quite unique. It was sleeping on its back like a human. This white peacock has a good relationship with him. The peacock opened its tail in front of the other party and attracted everyone's attention. It seemed to be saying, "If you want to look at me. Don't look at my sleeping friend." They are partners. They are very loving. They also have 4 children. They are also here today. However, they are usually raised in the wild and do not see people. It is not suitable for a close visit, the staff said. The guests listened to the story and were stunned. The more they listened, the more they wanted to see the 4 children. "Everyone, please follow me. We can go to the back and look at the new peacocks in the park through the railing." The guests reluctantly walked through the hall. The strange noise they made finally woke up the sleeping Yulishanda. He stretched out his claws and slowly climbed up from the ground. The first thing he saw was the AO Daisai who had just put away its peacock screen. The other party saw that he had woken up and tilted its head. How could there be so many humans here? Xiao Qishi looked away and saw the backs of a group of humans. This was not the main point. The main point was that the group of chattering little fur balls were not there. No way. AO Daisai lost all the children? Xiao Qishi thought about it and asked calmly, "AO Daisai, where are the children?" Through the other party's answer, a certain little bear, who could not wake up, was a little ashamed. "Did I really sleep so soundly? It must be the air conditioner." Xiao Qishi followed the large group of humans to the back. When she heard that they were going to see the new peacocks in the park this year, she pricked up her ears. "Go this way." AO Daisai corrected the little bear's direction. He judged where the children were based on the smell. Although there were also peacocks in the wrong direction, they were other people's peacocks. "Are you still not awake?" Perhaps the sleepiness bug affected Yulishanda's judgment, he thought. "Yes, I'm awake." Xiao Qishi of course knew that those were other people's peacocks. She also wanted to see them, but at the moment, her own children were more important. She obediently followed AO Daisai's footsteps. Perhaps she would have a chance to see them next time. The inspection of the peacocks in the sterile room had been completed. The staff had carefully dried their fur. Now they were fat and round. These staff members were all experienced in taking care of the peacocks, but they had to praise them. These 4 peacocks were really strong. Not only were their bodies strong, but they were also bold, lively, and cute. Taking care of them was not difficult at all. Thinking of the peacocks in the park, they had to be very careful even when blowing their fur. Those fragile little wings and claws looked like they could be crushed with just a pinch. Professor Han heard the data and felt very comfortable. What are their genders? Both parties were talking happily when the 2 fathers of the peacocks quietly arrived at the door. Their appearance really surprised the staff. They were a little excited. The children's surnames? Chao Chi-shi and Ao Dai-sai heard such important news the moment they arrived. They immediately quieted down and looked at the staff member, ready to hear the answer. The staff member seemed to feel the parents' eagerness and focus. This was an incredible experience. Her voice was a little nervous. Genders? Oh yes, I marked their ankles. 2 are boys and 2 are girls. This was really a perfect family combination, the humans present thought. As parents, Chao Chi-shi and Ao Dai-sai also thought that this was perfect. 2 boys and 2 girls were very good. This was too surprising. They did not expect that there would be girls among their children, but they all looked as naughty and mischievous. Sigh. The peacocks saw their parents' figures and immediately chirped. They seemed to be very resistant to the cage and wanted to escape. All children were like this. They might find it fresh when they first left their parents, but after a long time, they would miss them. They tossed and turned too much. The staff immediately opened the cage and stopped restricting their freedom. The 4 little furry balls rushed to their parents' side and hid under their father's thick feathers. The humans could only see some of their little claws outside. Don't be afraid. Yulashanda gently comforted them. It seemed that the inspection just now had caused a little stress reaction to the little peacocks. Ao Dai-sai also hid 2 under his abdomen. Although he did not pamper and comfort them like Yulashanda, he did not blame these delicate little guys. Thinking back to when Little Bear was only a year old, he lived alone on the glacier. At that time, there was no mother to love the little bear. Under the comfort of the familiar voice, the little peacocks quickly stopped chirping. It seemed that acting spoiled was the nature of all cubs, even if they were not wronged. The humans looked at this scene obsessively. Their brains were crazily secreting happy dopamine. The little peacocks who had calmed down quickly poked their little heads out. Let's go. Ao Dai-sai was not used to the smell of the disinfectant here. His sense of smell was very sensitive. Under his lead, a string of family members followed behind. Since the children had been found, Chao Chi-shi suggested to see the little peacocks. Let's see what children of the same age look like. And they could be the children's siblings. Although Ao Dai-sai did not understand what was so good about other people's children, he still obediently brought his partner and children to visit. When they found that the family was walking on the road to the little peacock's residence in the park, the staff behind them smiled bitterly. Logically speaking, this family was not allowed to enter. They could only enter after wearing sterile clothes and going through inspection. But who would be so cruel to stop them and deprive them of their freedom to visit the park? The group of early visitors standing in front of the railing were looking at the little peacocks with great interest. As they looked, they suddenly heard a burst of chatter. They collectively turned their heads and saw that another group of tourists had arrived. That family stopped 5 meters away from them and excitedly looked through the railing to see the little peacocks inside. These were the 2 peacocks they had met in the hall earlier. They finally saw the hidden green peacock in its entirety. It was indeed very beautiful. The 4 fluffy little furry balls were also very cute. The people looked at the few inside the railing and then looked at the few outside. The expressions on their faces made the staff feel bitter, because they knew very well what the guests were thinking. Yulashanda, who acted as if there was no one around, directly poked his head into the railing to look at other people's children. It was obvious that his children were raised better. The little peacocks standing by his feet also looked curiously at the children who looked very similar to them. Perhaps they wanted to go in and play with them. However, their father Ao Dai-sai was like a barrier, blocking their desire to run around. So they could only stick their heads in like the little bear's father. The people next to them were stunned. After that, their eyes did not move away from this family. Are they here to visit? The four little green peacocks, every movement was very similar to the big green peacock. Even their temperament was similar. As peacocks, they lined up in a row and put their heads on the railing to look at other peacocks. The scene was funny and cute. A family of 6. We were just ordinary sightseers, Bakeliao. Chapter 188. When Professor Han saw the group of guests, he gently explained to them, "Hello, everyone. The 6 peacocks you see are from outside the park, but the peacock eggs are still from the park. Just now, we examined the 4 little peacocks for the first time. There are 2 females and 2 males. Their physical condition is very good." He also briefly explained how the peacocks hatched them in the wild. Dozens of pairs of eyes looked at the pairs of slender little claws. Indeed, there were blue or pink marks tied to their ankles, indicating their gender. Even the big men could not help but smile when they saw such a cute family. Donating animal medical equipment had already been an idea. When people came to the scene and personally experienced the joy of harmony between humans and animals, they wanted to do more for the sanctuary. Or more accurately, they wanted to do more for the animals. After visiting all kinds of animals, it was noon. The guests were all called to the cafeteria for lunch. Another group of tourists was also hungry. The 4 little peacocks were clamoring for food. Well, the disadvantage of bringing children to a scenic spot appeared for the first time. Making noise in public. Xiao Qishi and Ao Daisai hurriedly brought them back to the cool hall. They were glad that they had brought food. However, there was not much food. It was only enough for the children to eat first. The 2 peacocks endured. Ao Daisai did not mind. He did not look hungry, even if he did not eat for a day. As long as he hydrated, he would be fine. Xiao Qishi cannot do it. He would be listless if he did not eat. It was already the year 2067. He would still be hungry. Just as Ao Daisai was about to turn around to hunt for the little bear, a slender figure approached. The point was not why a busy human would appear here. The point was that the other party was holding delicious food in his hands. Professor Han was very sorry. He was a little busy just now and could only find time to bring food to them now. It was a very luxurious lunch. The peacocks and the little peacocks could eat it. Looking at the food that the 2 fathers had prepared for their children, they were also very attentive. When they smelled more delicious food, they all stuck their heads out and wanted to eat. "Thank you." Yilashanda gestured to Professor Han. However, in the other party's eyes, he merely looked at him coldly. Yilashanda was not particular about the height of the plate. She directly reached her claws into the plate and grabbed a handful of food. Then, she placed the food on the ground and fed it to the chicks. This action was quickly learned by the little peacocks. After they finished eating the food on the ground, they would reach their little claws into the plate to grab the food. Ao Daisai, he had clearly demonstrated the correct way to eat with his beak. However, the little ones still prefer to learn little bear's habits, which could not be corrected. It was the hottest time of the day. Usually, they wouldn't have any appetite to eat in the wild, but today, in the cool air-conditioned room, the family of 6 ate intermittently for a long time. Beasts didn't have the concept of eating until they were full. Well, it was the same for humans. Therefore, during the afternoon nap, other than the Ao Daisai who was lying down, the rest of the peacocks who liked to sleep on their backs all had round bellies. After lunch, the staff member who went back to the office to check the surveillance footage was shocked. He thought that a few of the peacocks were dead. He asked carefully and found out that they were sleeping. In the afternoon, people started to get busy with work, but the guests in the hall did not move at all. At most, they just turned over. It was not until dusk came that the full day came to an end. The staff member clocked out, and the peacocks who came to the air-conditioned room slowly woke up. After a good night's sleep, everyone yawned loudly. They got up and stretched their bodies and stomped their feet. It was a good night's sleep. However, the staff member was about to get off work, so they should go home. Ao Daisai quickly put the children in a storage bag. Yilashanda thought that since the bag was empty, it was better to put some food back for dinner. That way, they would not have to fly out at night to look for food. Under the staff's supervision, Yolashanda ate and took without hesitation. After they left, the large hall suddenly quieted down, making people feel a little disappointed. The cleaners who came to clean later found that the corner used by the peacocks was not that dirty. They did not even find the expected feces. If possible, they hoped that the peacocks would come back tomorrow. Their wish was soon fulfilled. For the rest of the summer season, as long as the weather was hot and there was no rain, the white and green peacocks would bring their children to the hall of the park. This meant that people could watch the little peacocks grow up day by day. After a week of continuous visits, they became regulars of the reserve. Someone suggested that perhaps the little peacocks in the park could interact with the little peacocks in the wild. Professor Hahn thought about it seriously and felt that it was a good idea. On a good morning, he brought 2 little peacocks in a cage. He wanted to experiment with these 2 to see if they were suitable to play together. The 4 little peacocks were usually very lively and happy when they were together. Suddenly, 2 strangers of the same species appeared. They instantly quieted down and looked at each other with curiosity and a trace of caution. The little peacocks who came out from the yard were even more timid. They were the 2 most courageous of the peacocks. When the 2 sides were placed together, the contrast was obvious. In the end, it was the wild peacocks that slowly approached the new children. They chirped as they walked. Under their lead, the timid peacocks chirped as well. Not long after, the 2 groups of little peacocks played together. The wild peacocks brought a lot of novelty to the little peacocks in the park. They were soon mischievous and open. They chased each other around the hall. Under the surveillance, the wild peacocks suddenly ran into the bathroom in a group. The little peacocks in the park did not know what was going on. They followed in a daze. Humans, these little guys are so naughty. They won't let go of any place to play. Only the parents of the 2 big peacocks knew that the children were seriously going to the bathroom to poop. They were not going to play. Who would purposely go to the bathroom to play? It was not like they were 2. A.O. Daisai felt like he had been shot in the knee. Last time, he played with the little ones in the bathroom for a while, although it was just to accompany them. The little ones had new playmates. Yolashanda and A.O. Daisai were happy to see this. This way, the little ones would not chirp and run around their feet, because the feeling of tripping while walking was not pleasant. Also, when couples were sleeping together and suddenly a little head popped out, it was very annoying. The 2 little peacocks in the park quickly became the loyal playmates of the 4 wild peacocks. The 2 brothers chased after the 4 wild peacocks every day. They would do whatever the other party did. The staff brought them back to the yard. Although they could stay there, it could be seen that they were more excited playing outside. Their eyes were more lively. After this experiment, they learned that the little peacocks could stay and play together. Therefore, the staff became bolder and more little peacocks were released. In the end, it became all little peacocks playing together. The only thing that did not change was that the leader of the children was always the 4 wild peacocks. They appeared to be more assertive and brave. They were never afraid of the rugged terrain and unfamiliar environment. People could recognize them from a group of fluffy little peacocks at a glance. This summer was a very happy and comfortable summer in the minds of the staff. They who really loved the peacocks could see a group of little peacocks running around the park every day. They were so healthy, lively, and happy. This group of children would separate at night. They would go back to their homes and find their mothers. 2 months later, the little peacocks in the park who ran around with the wild peacocks every day grew taller and stronger. Their physical attributes were even better than before. The 4 wild peacocks did not need to be said. They were very sturdy. When autumn came, the feathers on their bodies changed. They were no longer as fluffy as when they were young. Instead, they were transitioning into the direction of adult peacocks. As the weather became cooler, the family of 6 no longer needed to come to the air conditioner. People had long expected this day to come. However, when the family of white and green peacocks was really lost, whether it was the staff or the little peacocks in the park, they were all very uncomfortable. They were depressed for a few days before they slowly returned to normal. From the images sent back by the drone, the family's life did not change at all. The four little peacocks were still playing and playing when they wanted to. It seemed like they did not remember the playmates they had met in the city during the summer. After they could basically control themselves, the two fathers no longer surrounded them all the time. Instead, they often left the children to play outside. The staff saw the four poor little peacocks who were still in an awkward period and went looking for food on their own. The silver lining was that there were four of them, so they could travel together. These sensible little guys would find a place to rest after eating and wait for their parents to come back to take them home. If their parents came back early, they would bring them some food. If they came back too late, they would be taken back to the nest to sleep. Since the children had grown up, their nest was no longer spacious enough. A.O. Daisai, who swore that he would not let a second nest in the family, was very active in building a second bedroom, starting from the next day. The next day, the staff noticed that the family did not come out to play by the stream. After a closer inspection, they realized that the whole family was busy today. The big green peacock brought a bunch of little peacocks and went back and forth on the mountain to pick up branches and grass. It was obvious that winter was coming and they wanted to build a comfortable nest. Yulashanda walked a few times and whined to A.O. Daisai, "My feet hurt." A.O. Daisai told him to rest. The next drone found that the big green peacock was not in the group transporting the materials. After a careful search, they found that the big green peacock was sleeping, and the hardworking little peacocks were still helping their fathers to transport the materials. Although the big green peacock was not doing it right, how could he enslave the children like this? People realized that they could not blame him at all. Everyone doted on the beautiful girl who grew up under their eyes. So what was wrong with slacking off and sleeping for a while? No, A.O. Daisai did not feel that he was enslaving the children at all. The nest he was building now was not for Yulashanda to live in. So Yulashanda helped him out of kindness, but it was his duty not to help. The construction of the nest lasted for 2 to 3 days. A.O. Daisai built a spacious and comfortable nest for the children. He used the remaining materials to rebuild the nest that he and Yulashanda lived in. This was not considered taking the fruits of the children's labor. This was wages. The little peacocks were very interested in the new nest. Before it was built, they often stayed on it. After it was built, everyone was very happy. But the problem was they only treated the new nest as a playground. They could jump on it for a while, but when it was time to sleep, they were still used to squeezing next to their parents, Yulashanda and A.O. Daisai. So this nest was built for nothing. After thinking for a while, Yulashanda thought of a good idea to sleep in separate nests. Everything had a withdrawal process. He told A.O. Daisai, "I'll bring them to sleep next door at night. When they are familiar with the new nest, I'll move back." A.O. Daisai, who was abandoned, thought to himself, "The little rascals have withdrawal symptoms. Do you think I don't?" He and Little Bear had slept in the same bed for so long. They had not been separated for even a day. He did not want to sleep in separate nests. After staying in the old nest alone for a while, A.O. Daisai also went to the new nest. The little peacocks were the happiest. They were used to this since birth. Squeezing together made them feel more secure. Yulashanda thought about it and agreed. A.O. Daisai was so pitiful. Forget it. A family should sleep in the same nest. Fortunately, his bad idea was very useful. When the little peacocks were familiar with the smell of the new nest, even if their parents secretly left in the middle of the night, they would not make a fuss. The couple who stayed in the old nest had to admit that this group of little peacocks was very easy to take care of. Yulashanda snickered and bragged to A.O. Daisai. "See, am I right? When they reach the age where they can do soy sauce, it will be easy for us." A.O. Daisai liked Little Bear's cheerful look. Yes. In the autumn night, there was a long-awaited intimate moment in the cave. Due to the limitations of their species, they could not experience the blushing of the face, the heartbeat, and the rush of adrenaline. However, just by rubbing against each other and whispering, they could get a strong sense of satisfaction. Cherish the time and live happily every day. They hugged each other and slept until dawn. When they opened their eyes, it was a bright and sunny day. Could they rest today after finishing their work? No, the poor winter was coming. This winter, They could not travel long distances to the zoo like last year. Moreover, Xiao Qishi and Ao Daisai did not want the children to always be opportunistic and use all kinds of convenience to maintain their own lives. What if there was no such convenience in the future? At the age when the little peacocks were growing up, they should be taught the orthodox way of living, not the air conditioning and food. This kind of thinking was unacceptable. Yulashanda did not know the orthodox way of living. He had been muddling around since birth, so when it came to education, he was a bad example. Fortunately, Ao Daisai was a serious beast. He knew how to teach the little peacocks how to survive in the wild, hunt for food, and fight. The growth of any animal in the wild was inseparable from the topic of life and death. Ao Daisai wanted to teach this lesson for a long time, but the eagle did not come to their place. It was difficult, but to be honest, the other little peacocks' growth education did not include the killing of the eagle. They were just 6 months old little peacocks. Their little peacocks already knew a lot. Little peacock in the park. The child is going crazy from being swept away. Let the child go. Chapter 189. In nature, males did not have much affection for their children. They were never like females, who were affected by hormones for a certain period of time and would do their best for their children. In fact, the genes of males were often accompanied by selfishness, greed, and exclusion. If Ao Daisai's animal genes controlled his rational and instinctive side, then his higher IQ than other animals affected his emotional side. Yulashanda gave him empathy. In the past, he treated and protected his companions well, but now he was raising a group of offspring from head to toe. Natural enemies would not easily set foot in a place where they lived. Weren't Xiao Qishi and Ao Daisai teaching their children? They took the trouble to bring the children to further places and taught them how to recognize the various small animals they encountered on the way. Some of them needed to be avoided, and some were poisonous, such as a green snake called a bamboo snake. Although the color looked very friendly, just like the mother Yulashanda that the children liked, it was highly poisonous. Xiao Qishi did not know how to express it, but snakes with triangular heads were collectively known as vipers, and they were all poisonous. Fortunately, these poisonous creatures liked to live in hidden and dark places, while peacocks liked open and bright areas. At most, they would encounter grass snakes and four-legged snakes in the grass. Once the two sides met, Ao Daisai would immediately stare at the other side with focused eyes and show the children how to hunt. Peacocks did not have sharp fangs, and their claws were not big enough. Even killing a snake would be a long process. Fortunately, the children were very smart. They understood that their father had been attacking the same spot on the prey's body where the snake's gallbladder was. If the gallbladder was damaged, the whole snake would be in trouble. After using this method to kill the prey, Ao Daisai thought of something and turned to look at his partner, who was with the children. He remembered that this was the method that Yulashanda had taught him in the past. After the snake died, the smell of blood spread. A group of black scorpions smelled it and came over with their tails up, ready to intercept this delicious meal. Ao Daisai immediately retreated and spread his wings to block his partner and children. His extremely defensive actions let the children know that this kind of black scorpion was also a poisonous creature that should not be provoked. In the deep mountains of Yunnan, there were countless small poisonous animals. Even Xiao Qishi did not recognize some of them. Therefore, he could only maintain a cautious attitude. If he did not recognize them, then they were poisonous. In the morning, it was time for the little peacock to go to class. When the sun shone brightly in the afternoon, they would go to the water to catch fish and stock up on food for the winter. Little Peacock learned fishing skills from Ao Daisai, while Yulashanda was in charge of drying the dried fish. But later on, he felt that when everyone learned how to catch fish, they also needed to learn how to dry them. Otherwise, how would they store them? Thus, he learned how to catch and dry fish. Catching fish was fine, but drying fish seemed to be incomprehensible to pure animals. They would eat it immediately, or they would not be able to resist eating it during the drying process. Xiao Qishi sighed. Children can't be taught. Now that you've finished eating, what are you going to eat in winter? Idiot. Little Peacock, who stole the fish, was pecked on the head and became a little emotional. He hung his head and ran to Ao Daisai to act like a spoiled child. Seeing this, Xiao Qishi snorted. He did not learn the useful things, but learned a lot of useless things. The weather was getting colder, and all the neighbors were busy preparing for winter. The 8 big and small tits at the door had eaten themselves fat, and the 2 rooms and 1 living room were not enough for them. Perhaps because of laziness, they had not built any more. As the father, Big Tit was often pushed out of the nest. Even Xiao Qishi pitied him and said to him earnestly, "We have extra materials here. If you want, you can use them to build a house. Don't be so pitiful." Big Tit tilted his head and looked at him curiously. He chirped as if asking, "Why didn't you go out this winter?" Xiao Qishi replied, "Because the children are still young. They can't go out, but they will definitely go out next year." What they did not know was that the zoo was also looking forward to their arrival. When they heard that this summer, the magical family intended to go to the center of the reserve to freeload off the air conditioning, the zoo seemed to understand what kind of role they played last year. But they did not mind. Welcome them warmly, okay? But it was destined that they would not be able to wait until this year. The White and Green Man's cave was filled with all kinds of food before winter. This was all thanks to the 2 of them. When the 2 fathers went out to stock up on food, the 4 little peacocks stayed in the nest obediently and did not cause any trouble for their parents. Every time Elishanda came back, he would see 4 pairs of eyes looking at him eagerly, as if to say, "Daddy, are you done with your work? Can you play with us for a while?" This was too soft-hearted. No one could refuse such a request, so Elishanda said to Ao Daisai, "Oh, Daisai, the children need me. You could go out first." Ao Daisai thought for a while, nodded, and agreed. He decided to take the little bear out the next time he came back. The busy life continued until the end of December. Ao Daisai, who had a strong sense of worry, finally felt that he had enough. Only then did he stop going out to look for food again and again. While Xiao Qishi divided his energy to take care of the children, he also carefully sorted the food brought back by his partner and neatly piled it in the cave. Everything he did, the little peacocks learned as much as they could. After all, it was good for their lives in the future. When he was free, Ao Daisai liked to stay by the little bear's side and leisurely tidy his feathers. He still loved cleanliness and did not like messiness and dirt. Xiao Qishi had been too busy recently. He took a bath before winter and did not have much time to tidy up the feathers on his tail. The other party took special care of him when he was free, sticking close to him day by day and tidying his feathers very neatly. Although Ao Daisai liked his white feathers very much, he liked the little bear's bright green feathers even more. When he tidied up, a few pieces fell off. Ao Daisai collected them and habitually put them in a bag of feathers. That was the little bear's masterpiece. The other party said that their feathers were good at keeping warm and could be collected as a quilt. Ao Daisai did not lack quilts and did not think of using the little bear's feathers to keep warm. He simply cherished the other party's feathers and felt that it was a pity to lose them. Moreover, the white and green color mixed together looked very nice. Xiao Qishi also saw Ao Daisai's actions and could not help but laugh in his heart. His Ao Daisai looked steady and deep, but in fact he was very simple. It was cold outside now, and the temperature at night could reach 0 degrees. This was considered mild. The main thing was that the wind was particularly strong. It was very dangerous for people with big wings and big tails like them to fly out. Therefore, it was necessary to store food in winter. When it was time to eat, the little peacocks were awakened by hunger. Xiao Qishi often taught them not to be loud. Well, of course, the education here was violent. After all, there was a language barrier. Therefore, after a long time, the little peacocks would not chatter when they woke up. They would express what they wanted. It was useless to just rely on loud voices. It was better to pounce on them and act spoiled. Perhaps it was because Xiao Qishi usually taught them more lessons, but the little peacocks were less afraid of Ao Daisai. When Ao Daisai was at home, they liked to stick to Ao Daisai more. Ao Daisai, who was lying in the nest, felt that he was being stepped on by pairs of small claws. He was too lazy to argue with them. However, if Xiao Qixi encountered this kind of thing, he would definitely teach them a lesson. For example, right now, he flapped his wings and put the little peacocks on the ground. He told them to stay there and eat in a while. Tonight's dinner was pine nuts and some dried fruit. The little peacocks could not peel pine nuts yet. The pine nuts they ate were all peeled by their parents. But after all, there were 4 children. Yulashanda, I'm tired. He glanced at the little peacock who was looking at him eagerly. He thought about it and stuffed the pine nuts under his claws into the peacock's hands. You can only improve by challenging the impossible. Ao Daisai turned a blind eye to this. After all, they would not starve to death. However, he was still very dedicated. Not only did he have to feed the little peacocks, he also had to feed the little bear. During the idle winter, the drone took pictures of the peacock family peeling pine nuts every day. After eating this kind of high-calorie food every day, the 4 little peacocks were visibly growing taller. After a winter of training, their pine nut peeling skills were also very good. It was all forced by their hunger. Yulashanda was thick-skinned, and occasionally, he could even freeload some food from the children. The arrival of the plum rain season also meant the beginning of the New Year's breeding season. The park started to get busy and did not have much energy to pay attention to this family in the wild. At the same time, it was also because their family was on the right track. If there were no accidents, they would be very prosperous in the future. This was a great blessing. The growth trajectory of the little peacocks was the same as Yulashanda's. After the second winter, they started to sprout, and in the summer, they grew beautiful tail feathers. When they were young, they were chatty and unsteady. As they grew up, they gradually became closer to their other father. At the beginning of spring, an eagle was looking for food nearby. Ao Daisai led the 4 children and killed the eagle. At this time, the 4 little peacocks did not have the advantage of flying. They relied on their fearless spirit and their powerful father. Xiao Qixi felt that there was no need to be so fierce. However, if Ao Daisai insisted on teaching them this way, he did not object. They really learned to fly in May. It was a windy season. The little peacocks, whose tails were not fully grown, were pushed to the cliff earlier than the little bear's father. This was a very important day for them, and even more so for the sanctuary. They had been looking forward to this moment since a long, long time ago. Could the 4 little peacocks learn to fly like Little 5? Was this a coincidence, or was it inevitable? Without fear or hesitation, the little peacocks stood on the cliff and spread their wings and rushed down. Yulashanda also spread her wings and followed the little peacocks. She thought, "They're stronger than me." That was because the little peacocks usually saw them fly. They thought that flying was their instinct and did not have so many worries. They were born to be like their parents. They were strong, brave, smart, and capable. The second little peacock followed behind its brother and sister and rushed down with a stomp of its leg. Ao Daisai escorted him. Beautiful and light, they were like a beautiful scenery, one after another across the blue sky. The people who watched them fly were excited by the little peacock's bravery. It turned out that they were not individuals. This group of green peacocks could really regain the ability to fly after losing the ability to fly for countless generations. The author has something to say. There is a second update today at 7 p.m., and the peacocks have about 10 chapters. Chapter 190. The 4 little green peacocks in the wild had learned how to fly. It was foreseeable that they would leave a deep mark in the history of green peacocks. From then on, a new era would begin. Everyone who had witnessed this was extremely excited at this moment. Professor Han was extremely glad that he had made the right decision, which was to choose 4 eggs from 4 families. Even if they had been weak and powerless at the beginning, they had now grown into a promising generation. Seeing the 4 little ones becoming more and more proficient in their gliding skills and soaring in the wind with such confidence, everyone was excited and could not help but think of the little peacocks in the park. In comparison, they had lost the opportunity to learn to fly and were inevitably overshadowed. But what could they do? Even if these little peacocks were sent to the white and green peacocks, they would not be able to bravely jump off the cliff like the four little ones. The children raised by Qiao Qishi and Ao Daisai were indeed very brave. It seemed that they had inherited the confidence of their adoptive parents and did not think that flying was a difficult thing to do. The fear of flying high was not a fear at all. In fact, they were eager to conquer the wind around them. When they successfully landed on the cobblestones by the water, the little peacocks excitedly flapped their wings, as if celebrating their first flying experience. Yo, we are so awesome. After Qiao Qishi landed, he was even more excited than the children. If he was given a piece of music, he could dance by the water. The little peacocks, escorted by Ao Daisai, also landed smoothly. His little claws were trembling a little, but he was very happy to meet his brothers and sisters. He did not know what they were talking about. Perhaps they were flattering each other. The two fathers left them there because there were still two more on the cliff that needed to be led. Seeing that their fathers and siblings had flown away, the two little ones could not wait to poke their heads out. This was probably the side of them that was least like Qiao Qishi. Qiao Little Bear, if you want to praise them, just praise them. Don't criticize them. Qiao Qishi and Ao Daisai turned around and flew up. The little peacocks heard their father's instructions and dove down like dumplings. Their clumsy figures contained a lot of energy. It was obvious that they enjoyed gliding. This was great. They would teach their children this in the future, right? Qiao Qishi thought, proud of their bravery and success. Perhaps this was the meaning of inheritance. The two fathers accompanied the four children to practice again and again. After 2 weeks, they began to learn more flying skills. Qiao was especially dissatisfied. When Ao Qiao taught him, it took him a long time just to glide. Qiao was so fast. He would never admit that he was a noob. To fly. They were born as birds. Flying is their instinct, but you are not. Otis looked at Alexander intently. They were born as birds, so they could accept their talent of flying without any distractions and wouldn't think too much about it. Neither are you. Qiao Qishi sighed. Ao Daisai was too strong. Nothing in the world seemed to be able to stop him. The topic could have ended there. Otis was not the kind of person who would overthink things. If he had nothing better to do, he would find a place to hide from the wind and take a nap. But today, he was like a curious baby. His beautiful ruby eyes kept looking at his beloved partner, as if he was hiding a ball of confusion that he had been pondering for a long time. What is Yulashanda's nature? Ao Daisai even used himself as an example, as if he was afraid that the other party would not understand. Take me for example. I was born a polar bear. This was what the humans called him, and he always remembered it. Did the revelation come so suddenly? Speaking of which, after being together for so long, Yulashanda had almost forgotten the difference between herself and Ao Daisai. But it seemed that there was no harm in telling him. How could he bear to lie to his partner? The only thing he was worried about was, would Ao Daisai have a bad reaction? Would Ao Daisai be able to accept a human/beast relationship? *T. The more he thought about it, the more scared he became. Because he loved Ao Daisai too much, he could not accept the slightest change in their relationship. Little did he know that Ao Daisai cared about him more than he thought. He could not bear to see him suffer, even a little. Ao Daisai saw that Yulashanda was in a dilemma. He immediately hugged Yulashanda nervously and said gently, "I don't want to know." Qiao Qishi. After understanding Ao Daisai's nervousness, Qiao Qishi found it funny. Then, she was very touched and hugged Ao Daisai back. Speaking of which, their current posture should be very strange, right? Anyway, no one saw it. Even if they saw it, well, there was nothing shameful about hugging between couples. No, Ao Daisai, I still want to tell you. Qiao Qishi snuggled up to the person she had always relied on and made this decision. Ao Daisai's reaction made him believe that even if the universe exploded, the other party's feelings for him would not change at all. I'm actually, Ao Daisai quietly pricked up his ears. Actually, it did not matter. Knowing the answer satisfied his curiosity and deepened his understanding of Little Bear. How should he put it? Xiao Qixi thought about it, and said in a very Versailles manner, I am so smart, smarter than many animals. Actually, you should have guessed it, right? Ao Daisai was also so smart. He probably did not need to say that word out loud. After hearing the hint, Ao Daisai tilted his head and said his guess, monkey. It was said that monkeys had the highest IQ among all animals. Xiao Qixi was about to faint. She wanted to peck the other party's face twice. You are the monkey. Which eye of yours can tell that I am a monkey? This guess itself was outrageous. Ao Daisai was not only pushed out of his partner's arms because he said something wrong, but he was also chased and pecked a few times. However, he was not sad at all. His eyes were even full of smiles. Those who did not know better would think that he was deliberately pretending to be confused. I already said that I have the highest IQ. Can't you guess higher? You look down on me. Xiao Qixi was really a little angry. He was willing to guess that Ao Daisai was an alien with a high IQ. Why would Ao Daisai guess that he was a monkey? Not a monkey, not a polar bear. In Ao Daisai's knowledge, polar bears did not have high IQ. Even when he was reincarnated as a lion for the third time, he was still an ignorant beast. It was not until he became a killer whale that he had a clear sense of self. That was the beginning of his awakening of wisdom. Higher IQ than a monkey and not a sea creature. That could only be the answer. I guessed it, Ao Daisai said. What? Xiao Qixi asked fiercely. After the torment just now, he was no longer nervous. F***CK his nervousness. What else can a land animal with higher IQ than a monkey have? Ao Daisai squinted at him and did not explain. The answer should be accurate this time. Xiao Qixi observed the other party's performance resentfully, but it seemed that there was no change. Ao Daisai, this country bumpkin, did not know how shocking the human/beast love was. Bullshit. Ao Daisai knew a lot. He knew that the world was dominated by humans. Humans thought that they were the masters of the earth, and their attitude was always higher than other animals. Humans and animals were not equal. The gap between them was far greater than the gap between lions and antelopes. After unveiling this layer of mystery, it was not Yelashanda who should be worried, but the smart Ao Daisai. Why did Yelashanda like a silly polar bear in the first place? He hugged the treasure that was like a treasure, and for the first time, he was not very confident. At this point, Xiao Qixi could tell from Otis's mannerisms that there was a gentleness hidden within his rough mannerisms. She was no longer worried about herself, but instead, she was worried about Otis's emotions. Was Ao Daisai worried about the sincerity of a human/beast love combination? It did sound ridiculous, but Xiao Qixi had to praise Ao Daisai and flatter him. You were the most handsome and white polar bear in the Arctic at that time. Wasn't it reasonable for me to fall in love with you? Yelashanda said sincerely. The reason why I fell in love with you was the reason why you raised me against your instincts. Miracles happen because both parties work together and not because of one party's compromise. Ao Daisai understood the meaning of this, and his temporary anxiety was swept away. What his partner was born with did not affect his happiness. Just as the other party said, even if they were reincarnated as dung beetles, they would still be the happiest dung beetle husband. Little bear, are we going to become dung beetles next time? After Ao Daisai resurrected, he began to tease the little bear and joke with the little bear. No, if you want to be a dung beetle, Ao Daisai can be it yourself. Confessing the truth that they had been hiding did not seem to have much impact on their lives. They were still busy educating the child every day and eating 3, 4, 5, and 6 meals a day. This was not to say that Ao Daisai was stupid. In fact, he just believed that since Yelashanda could fall in love with the most handsome and white polar bear in the Arctic at that time, she could also fall in love with the most beautiful white peacock in Yunnan. If Xiao Qixi knew about Ao Daisai's thoughts, he would definitely give the other party 32 rage points. Sigh, a dog that only cares about looks. Looking at the green peacocks that grew up one by one, Xiao Qishi felt that it was a pity that they could not inherit Ao Daisai's divine aura. At present, the two boys looked like him, and they were raised to be valiant and high-spirited. Their eyes were very sharp, and they were definitely influenced by Ao Daisai. The girls did not have such slender tail feathers, but they were also graceful and graceful. Their bodies were beautiful, and their tails were not much worse than the brothers. They were still in the ignorant adolescence, but they seemed to be in pairs. From their daily interactions, there were signs of puppy love. Xiao Qishi was a little worried that they were close relatives, and the children born this way might not be healthy. But thinking about it, even he could think of this problem. As a professional breeder, he should not neglect it. Through the drones, people also observed the 4 little peacocks in pairs, which made them so excited that they could not sleep. This meant that they were about to have 2 nests of completely wild peacock eggs, which would change the history of green peacocks. Thinking too far ahead, as parents, Xiao Qishi and Ao Daisai did not think so far ahead. The only thing they were thinking about now was when the babies would learn to fly completely. Summer vacation is here. Hurry up. The author has something to say. Ao Daisai is so good. Who doesn't want to be Ao Daisai's baby? Chapter 191. It wasn't that Yolashanda wanted to freeload off the free lunch and air conditioning. He just wanted to show off the beautiful children he had raised. They were becoming more and more dazzling by the day. Of course, the humans' drones had probably taken 360 degrees pictures of them without any blind spots. They might even be able to count how many tail feathers they had. Even Yolashanda might not know this as a parent. After all, he wouldn't stare at his children's butts for no reason. It wasn't to the extent of even knowing how many tail feathers they had. It could only be said that the humans were indeed eagerly anticipating their arrival. Xiao Qishi, don't worry, I'm still practicing. Ao Daisai felt fortunate that the temperature was moderate this summer. Every morning, he would bring the children out for a flight before the sun rose. Most of the time, Xiao Qishi would be the only one left in the cave. It seemed the whole family knew that he loved to sleep in, so they didn't want to wake him up. Xiao Qishi felt at ease being spoiled by the whole family. As for psychological burdens, there really wasn't one. After all, his hard times were over. It was only natural for him to enjoy life now. He would only wake up late in the morning and eat something hurriedly. Then, he would fly to the water to wash his face and enjoy his beauty. Xiao Qishi's partner and children were flying above her head. When she saw a reflection on the water getting closer and closer, she cursed in her heart. She looked up and saw a mischievous little rascal pouncing on her from above. It was inevitable that they would collide head-on. Xiao Qishi would have been able to catch the little chick when he was younger, but the problem was that the other party was already heavy. He slipped and plunged into the shallow water. Xiao Qishi face-bombed and almost exploded. Had he learned all that for nothing? He didn't even know how to do it on Fort Continent. Ao Daisai, with his sharp senses, immediately turned around and flew over after noticing the car accident. He anxiously stopped beside Yolashanda and rescued him from the water. The young peacock, who had grown into a young man, stood up on his own. Even with a head full of wet and messy feathers, he did not look remorseful at all. However, Xiao Qishi and Ao Daisai did not blame him. Why would they blame an unintelligent peacock, let alone a baby they had raised? Does it hurt? Ao Daisai asked. No, it doesn't hurt. Xiao Qishi hurriedly expressed that he understood that she was just too excited to see him. That was why she pounced on him. This was a way to express her feelings. However, it was hard to imagine that birds would have such passionate feelings for their parents. It made Yolashanda wonder if he had raised a litter of dogs. There were no birds in the natural world that were so clingy to their parents, so he didn't know if it was a good thing or a bad thing. Xiao Qishi did not mind. However, Ao Daisai would not allow such a thing to happen again. He scolded the silly thing that was even more pathetic than the little bear, hoping that it would change its bad habit next time. The young peacock was scolded by his strict father. Not only did he not surrender, He even raised his head proudly and retorted with his rough voice. Ayo, Daisai. At noon, when everyone was having lunch, the brave peacock was being carried off the cliff by his father. Did you see that? Rebellious peacock did not have a good ending. At first, Xiao Qishi thought that it was an accident. However, he realized that the peacock had flown so well that it was obviously intentional. The child was so disappointing that he could not find a reason to plead for mercy. However, the sun was really strong. It would be bad if the peacock got a heat stroke. He was worried that Ao Daisai would stop after an hour and let the child rest. Come and eat, Xiao Qishi said. The young peacock ran over like a puppy. He was not the only one. The other peacocks were the same. Great, he had 4 puppies. During the lunch break, Ao Daisai was free to do whatever he wanted. After a busy morning, he found a shady place to lie down and take a nap. His little bear and the little peacocks were fishing for clam shells by the water. Now all the little peacocks had learned to drop the clam shells from a high altitude to eat the delicious food inside. The 1-year-old peacock was still a child at heart. He liked to play with the little bear in the mountains. Ao Daisai took a nap and found that the few of them had disappeared. If there was no accident, they must have gone to the mountains to look for wild fruits to eat. Yes, Yulishanda and the children had gone to the mountains. He could only fully understand how fast they had improved by moving with them. Although this was a natural talent that the children were born with, it was definitely not without Ao Daisai's earnest teachings. Without Ao Daisai, they would not be as outstanding as they were now. Yulishanda did not know that he had taught the little peacocks many things. For example, when they came out to play and filled their stomachs with wild fruits, they should not forget to bring some back. Whether it was to give it to their partner or to store it, it was a good habit. When Ao Daisai woke up, he found that there were many wild fruits in front of him. Some were big, some were small, and there were also bunches of them. Needless to say, the best preserved bunch was Yulishanda's masterpiece. Ao Daisai happily ate one. It tasted sweet. Of course, he accepted the gifts that the children gave him. He liked to eat sweet things. It was a habit that would not change no matter how many lifetimes he lived. The lunch break was used to play, which meant that the afternoon classes would be more difficult. Usually, the 4 peacocks would be so tired that they could not even lift their wings at night. Looking at them, Xiao Qishi wanted to laugh. Are we still going out to play at noon tomorrow? The answer was obvious. These peacocks were definitely going. Sure enough, after lunch the next day, they still excitedly went out to play. Although this period of time was tiring, it was also a happy period worth remembering. In late July, Ao Daisai finally admitted that the 4 children's flying skills were up to standard. Take note, it was only up to standard. Was this still not considered good? Xiao Qishi, who watched them every day, had 3 more question marks on his head. He was confused. They were flying so well, but it was only up to standard. He felt that Ao Daisai was too strict. Ao Daisai had his own standards. How should he put it? The children still had a long life ahead of them. They still had a lot of room for improvement. Of course, they were only up to standard. Xiao Qishi suddenly realized that Ao Daisai was right. He was still too lazy. What's wrong with being a salted fish if he's just mumbling softly? Obviously not. The 4 peacocks, yes. After the flying lesson, Yulishanda suggested bringing the peacocks to the park to get some air conditioning. Ao Daisai immediately disagreed. It's not hot this year. Yulishanda stared at him, who said that it had to be hot to go. He was not going to get some air conditioning. He was going to get some air conditioning. Ao Daisai looked at him. He did not understand. Why did he want to go if it was not hot? To get some air conditioning? Xiao Qishi, he did not care. He was going anyway. It was not that he did not have a way to deal with Ao Daisai. After thinking for a while, he said, "Then you look after the house. I'll bring the children." Ao Daisai did not hesitate to change his words. "Then I'll go too." Xiao Qishi rolled his eyes. "You should have said that earlier. You think I can't deal with you?" They decided to go to the park. The days on the calendar were crossed off. There was not much time left for summer. The park staff were sure that the peacocks would not be coming this year. The weather was pleasant this year. This was a good thing for all animals. Compared to meeting the peacocks, People hoped that the animals in the wild could enjoy a comfortable summer. But people still felt a sense of loss. They wanted to see the peacocks up close, see their expressions, and feel their emotions. They did not want to admire them through a screen. One morning in early August, people heard an unfamiliar voice. Everyone put down their work and ran out to take a look. The voice belonged to Yolashanda. He was flying around when he realized that he had accidentally gotten high. He was the only one on 4 continents. Ao Daisai and the children were left far behind. In truth, Ao Daisai could have caught up to him easily, but he was in charge of leading the way. The first thing people saw was the familiar green peacock landing on the paved stone road. It seemed that this peacock loved stepping on stone instead of grass. Of course, the grass in the park was man-made and prohibited from being stepped on. Yolashanda would never do something so uncultured. Why is he the only one here? Everyone's hearts skipped a beat when they saw a lone peacock. They were afraid that something bad had happened. But that shouldn't be the case. They had been paying close attention to this family all this time. Don't worry, he seems to be summoning his companions. Han Shui felt warm and happy to see the peacock arrive. He had watched the peacock grow up, and he was the one who had made it happen. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that the peacock was his child. About 3 minutes later, a commotion broke out from the forest. Everyone looked up and saw a beautiful creature in white appear in their vision. Riding the wind, she slowly flew over the wall from high above, like a fairy descending beside the big green peacock, and then folded her beautiful, dreamy wings. Following that, its arrogant eyes swept over them briefly before sticking close to the peacock. It seemed to be whispering something to the peacock. Such an intimate interaction. Perhaps it was sweet talking? Xiao Qi only wanted to say that they were thinking too much. Ao Daisai didn't speak sweet nothings easily. It was just out of habit. Seeing this, everyone couldn't help but smile. What would make them happier was yet to come. With a few clattering sounds, the 4 little peacocks, who were still not very familiar with their first long-distance trip, landed nearby one by one. Compared to last year's visit, they looked completely different now. They were no longer ugly, but incomparably beautiful. They didn't look like ordinary creatures anymore. Other than their beautiful feathers, what was more eye-catching was their temperament and demeanor. It was obvious that they were wild birds. They were sharp and alert, being stared at by the group of peacocks with unfamiliar and vigilant eyes. The workers in the park felt a little uncomfortable. It was unfamiliar and vigilant. It seemed that the 2 large peacocks didn't look at them like that. Only the little peacocks had such vigilance. People were quite sad, but it was understandable. When the 4 peacocks' eyes moved to Han Shui, they finally had a different emotion. Obviously, they remembered Han Shui. Receiving the treatment of 4 new generation peacocks, shaking their wings was enough to make Han Shui happy for a long time. He was honored to entertain this family again. As the scene of 6 gorgeous peacocks gathered together was too shocking, they stared for a long time before finally contentedly remembering what to do next. Everyone immediately retreated back to their posts, reluctantly leaving space for these precious guests. Feeling the appreciative eyes of this group of people, Yolashanda was also satisfied because he had achieved his goal of showing off his children. Next, he led the way to the familiar hall to rest. Returning here after a year, the little peacocks quickly adapted. People saw with their own eyes that they took happy steps and chased each other on the road. Just like last summer, they were lively and cheerful. Someone whispered to Han Shui, "Why don't we let the little peacocks of the same age come out and interact with them? Maybe something good will happen." Han Shui immediately shook his head and said, "Do you think they will still like the little peacocks we raised?" If they didn't like them, animals would also choose their partners based on appearance and ability. Just flying alone, the little peacocks in the park lost. The author has something to say. Towards the end of the story, everyone gave suggestions in the comment section last time. It was very useful. This time, help the children too. Chapter 192. Everyone went to visit their playmates from last year. They had grown up, and they still remembered each other through the railing. They stared at each other after they met. Who said peacocks had no feelings? They also had hidden emotions in their hearts that no one knew about. The young peacocks inside the railing ran over and danced excitedly. Perhaps meeting their childhood playmates was a very special event in their boring lives. Not only the beautiful males could dance, but the females, who were not so outstanding, also danced. However, it was not a courtship behavior. They were just happy. The four extravagant guests, who were warmly welcomed, also returned the most lively interactions with their playmates who were bound to the railings. Then they raised their heads and shouted. Their voices were not pleasant to hear, but they were full of emotions. The ones inside expressed their desire to come out, and the ones outside expressed their eagerness to call out. When they were young, they did not understand what a railing meant. Now they seemed to understand that it was a shackle that imprisoned their freedom, so they tried to peck it with their beaks. They did not want it. When a human saw this scene, they had mixed feelings. They envied their pure friendship, or it should be called brotherly love. They were brothers and sisters from the same nest, but their fates were completely different. However, the four of them had paid a huge risk to obtain their freedom. The staff opened the fences to allow the young peacocks to come out and meet with their friends. Although they were no longer the youngest peacocks in the park, their generation was obviously doted on, and they were still allowed to do as they pleased in various places in the park. The two mature peacocks, like the humans, watched the young ones play with a kind of affection unique to elders. The big green peacock seemed to be eager to try, but due to the surrounding gazes, he finally shyly folded his wings. Xiao Qi, what are you talking about? He was just doing a routine stretch. Don't wrongly accuse him. Ao Daisai, who could not stand the heat, swayed back to the air-conditioned hall. Xiao Qi also kept looking back. He saw the children play with their friends and fly up from time to time. His friends were stunned. TSK. It was fine if they occasionally flew up, but what was worse was that they flew up into the trees. To be honest, this was a bit too much. Weren't they showing off? In fact, the little peacocks in the park would also fly at a low altitude, but they would never be able to reach the treetops as soon as they spread their wings like their friends. Every time the staff saw this scene, they would feel sad and guilty for their little peacock. Sorry, they did not have the conditions to let the little peacocks learn to fly. Could it be that they were going to directly bring him up the mountain and push him down? That was impossible. Indeed, if this group of playful peacocks were delayed on the road for 3 to 5 days, wouldn't they be irresponsible to the tourists by selling the tickets in advance? The manager was speechless, but now is not the time to care so much. They could only pray that the other party would not be too playful and would quickly enter the park. The migration team did not deliberately play. They were too big a target this time. There was no way they could stay outside for too long. The only place they could stay safely was the zoo. So they hurried and finally arrived at night. After all, freeloading was not something to be proud of. They felt a little embarrassed in the middle of the day. In a completely unfamiliar environment, the young peacocks who were not afraid of anything became a little reserved. They looked around and stuck close to their parents. It was very lovable. Ao Daisai took them to the woods where they used to rest. The nest he and Yolashanda built was still there, but it was very old after 2 years. The thin branches would break with a touch. It seemed that they could only nest in the half-withered grass for the night. There was no danger here. When their parents did not continue to hide them in the trees, the young peacocks understood. The staff who looked forward to their arrival every day saw them the next morning when they came to feed the peacocks. They were immediately surprised and ran to tell each other that their specially invited employees had finally arrived at their post. "You're here." What was going on? The peacocks felt that this human smile was very flattering. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. They hurried to prepare the food. Last year, only 2 peacocks came and had to be fed separately. This year, there were 6 peacocks, so they had to prepare 2 troughs. In order to prevent them from snatching food, the keepers deliberately separated the troughs. In the end, they found that they were very modest and would not snatch food from each other. The visitors who came to the zoo today were very lucky. They saw a group of green peacocks early in the morning. Many of them came for publicity. The key was that the zoo's publicity was very sneaky. It did not say when the green peacocks would come, only that they would come in a short period of time. It was like opening a blind box. Fortunately, 30 yuan was not expensive. The loyal fans bought pre-sale tickets crazily in order to see the family of white and green peacocks. Today, they finally got what they wanted. Whoa, the children are very beautiful too. Who doesn't say that the male mother is outstanding? They didn't come last year to take care of the children. When the children grow up, they immediately bring them out to show off. Doghead. The peacocks who have been in prison for a long time express. I like to see you humans being surprised by nothing. Ha! There were more and more new faces in the group of green peacocks. In the spring of the second year, the little peacocks were 22 months old and were growing into big peacocks. At the same time, they ushered in their first breeding period after adulthood. The two fathers hurriedly returned with the two pairs of young couples, and then faced a very practical problem. They only had one house, but they had two sons. What should they do? Even if they moved out, it did not seem good to let two small families live together. What's more, Ao Daisai did not spoil the younger generation so much. He did not seem to intend to give up his and Little Bear's home. But he was not so cold. He would take the children to find a new address. No matter what species, in Ao Daisai's understanding, when it was time to reproduce, it had to leave its parents. No one was an exception. The difference was that other parents would not continue to do anything for their children, but he and Yolashanda would. The author has something to say. There are a lot of unrealistic beasts in the comment section. I have an idea. In the future, I will write a book called The Ferocious Guardians. It will be a collection of unrealistic beasts. Mermaids, winged demons, and other strange creatures. As for Little Bear, I will write 2 more units to let him and Ao Daisai have a perfect ending. The lifespan of a green peacock was about 20 years. According to the rule of 2 years, Yolashanda could indeed be a great-great-great-grandfather. The more Yolashanda thought about it, the happier he was. He was so happy that he was lying on his side in the nest. But to be honest, he was not used to the sudden calmness in the house. Fortunately, Ao Daisai accompanied him and made him happy. Ao Daisai was visibly happy. He did not have to take in the children anymore. Everything was delicious. When he had children, he was not willing to fly too far to find delicious food. Now, in order to make the little bear happy, he was very active in finding delicious food everywhere. Without children, the jar of honey at home was also full. Xiao Qishi squinted. In the blink of an eye, half a month later, the 2 female peacocks came with good news. They each laid a nest of 6 eggs. Their husbands flew to their parents' house early in the morning to pass on the good news. Xiao Qishi and Ao Daisai went to visit. Of course, they could not go empty-handed. The honey that they had painstakingly found was given away by the little bear just like that. Ao Daisai could not be said to be stingy. Well, since the other party loved the children, then he would love the little bear even more. In the natural world, male peacocks did not share the responsibility of raising children. However, Yolashanda and Ao Daisai's children were naturally different. They had been taught from a young age to love and be loyal to their partners. Just like how Daddy Dub was super good to Little Bear's Daddy Woody, they would also be super good to their partners Woody. Looking at the white and fat eggs, Xiao Qishi and Ao Daisai said, "Did I remember wrongly? Don't you think they look better than the eggs we got back then?" Little Bear did not remember wrongly. Ao Daisai nodded. "They look better than you." He was talking about when the little bear was still an egg. Xiao Qishi was very happy. Then they will definitely look good when they are born. Of course, they knew what this meant. This meant that the eggs were very healthy, and the eggs they got back then were not healthy. Although they were a little angry, they could understand the actions of the reserve. It was already very good that the other party was willing to give them a chance. The good news that the two female green peacocks in the wild had laid eggs immediately spread throughout human society. It was very encouraging. The reserve really wanted to know the situation of the eggs, but they knew what was important. They decided not to interfere at all this time and let this generation become completely wild green peacocks. The children on both sides had laid eggs, and Yulashanda's life began to be busy and full again. In addition to taking care of his family life, he would send some food over every now and then to feed the expectant mother who was incubating the eggs so that she could replenish her nutrition. Was it considered solved? Yes, and it was solved beautifully and thoroughly. From breeding to returning to nature, it was done in one step. In April of the following year, when the first batch of children were only 1 year old, the two female peacocks laid a total of 16 eggs. The staff at the reserve were going crazy. If all of them could survive, wouldn't it mean that the number of wild green peacocks would soon surpass the number of the park? 1-year-old peacocks were at the age when they were mischievous and lively. Parents had to take care of both the eggs and the peacocks. They were too busy. Xiao Qishi and Ao Daisai had been idle for a year. At this time, they volunteered to help take care of the peacocks. There were 6 in a family, and together there were 12 peacocks. Fortunately, they had learned to find food on their own and did not need their grandfather to take care of them. They only needed to lead them to the wild every day and supervise them so that they did not run around or meet with danger. Anyway, it was no different from raising chickens. At this time, Xiao Qishi could still comfort Ao Daisai. It's okay. We're just helping to take care of them. They can eat and run on their own. How difficult can it be? Ao Daisai looked at him and seemed to have something to say. It was not difficult to just help take care of them, but Xiao Qishi did not expect that after the second nest came out of the shell, their parents would be even busier and would not have any extra energy to take care of these young ones. But these older ones could not fly yet. They were about to learn to fly. If their parents did not have time to take care of them, what could they do? They could not just watch their grandchildren become real free-range chickens. They still had to learn how to fly. Of course, the responsibility of teaching fell on the shoulders of Otis and him. This was what Ao Daisai did not say in his heart. Ciao, little bear, pain mask. JPGI thought I could relax after becoming a grandfather. Sob, sob, sob. The author has something to say. I'm going to make an advanced copy of what I said yesterday. Go bookmark it after you read it, _W. In order to commemorate the two peacocks forever, people decided to prepare a documentary about them called The Peacock King. Xiao Qishi and Ao Daisai, who were still quite healthy, suddenly realized that one day there were more cameras following them. Ao Daisai didn't care, but Arya Lashanda had a trace of the burden of being an idol. This meant that he would have to take care of his appearance in the future. He could no longer stand by the water with 2 big eye bags and yawn with his mouth wide open. He also couldn't let people take pictures of him standing with his legs apart. This was so ungraceful and undignified. It was simply damaging to the green peacock's image. Other than paying attention to his image, Xiao Qishi didn't change much about his daily life. As usual, he liked to spread his wings and fly down from the cave entrance early in the morning. Then he stood on a tall rock and looked down at the large and small peacocks with satisfaction. Noticing his arrival, the green peacocks, scattered all over the place, seemed to have been mysteriously summoned and gathered around him. Mysterious summoning? No, these guys just thought that he was fun. Their running body language seemed to be saying, "You're here. Where are we going to play today?" This scene was very normal for Xiao Qishi, but he didn't know how beautiful and shocking the scene was. In history, there was a scene of 100 birds worshipping the phoenix. That scene was more or less like this. But the emerald green was too monotonous. Not long after, A snow-white fairy flew over from a high place and landed proudly and gracefully on the rock. His arrival added a finishing touch to the whole scene. "You're here." The green peacock and the white peacock snuggled together intimately, surrounded by their descendants who looked up at them in admiration. The cameraman behind the camera was amazed. Only shooting nature could make such a deep impact on people's hearts. This long one-shot video was the perfect ending scene for the documentary Peacock King. Although the documentary ended, the story of the two peacocks was still tirelessly told until the end of their lives. Ao Daisai was 2 years older than Xiao Qixi, but he was a mutant of the blue peacock, so his lifespan was naturally longer than the green peacock. Xiao Qixi didn't regret his short lifespan at all. He was grateful for the 2 years difference, which balanced out the difference in lifespan between himself and Ao Daisai. Of course, he hoped that both of them could live as long as possible. As long as they could live one more day, they could be together for one more day. Compared to a life full of danger, Yulashanda especially liked this life of the peacocks. This was the most peaceful and happy life they had ever lived. There was no competition, no bad environment, only freedom and happiness. It was so beautiful that he didn't dare to expect more. It would be too greedy of him to hope for another lifetime. The author has something to say. The Peacock chapter ends here. The theme of this chapter is a perfect fairy tale, a very ideal life, and also a precious memory. You're tuning into the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.